Hello everyone, welcome to the second semi-final here, live from Valencia. It's Pro Tour Born of the Gods. Rich, BDM, Luis with you for this epic encounter between Shaun McLaren of Canada. There you see him collecting his final moments of thought before this match against one of the breakout stories of the weekend from Europe, Patrick Dickmann of Germany. And there you see Dickmann, he is getting ready to go with his Tarmo twin list. He wasn't content with merely winning European Grand Prix with twin, he decided to add Tarmogoyf to make it even better. Brian David Marshall, what can we expect over the next 2 or 3 games?
We can expect to see some Tarmogoyfs, some Pestermites in the same deck, playing together like cats and dogs, signs of the apocalypse from Patrick Dickmann. We expect to see Shaun McLaren just, playing Planeswalkers, Snapcaster Mages, Bolts, really just trying to take control.
Yeah, what Dickmann really wants to do is pressure McLaren and make him use his removal on his green creatures, which then opens the door for Pestermite or Deceiver Exarch to Splinter Twin and win.
Well, we started off with Serum Visions on the right of your screen from Patrick Dickmann. That lets him select things a little better for the future.
How important is that we see there's an Ajani Vengeance in Shaun McLaren's hand? How important is a card like a Planeswalker in this matchup?
This is one of the matchups where it's at its worst, actually, just because McLaren does not have very many sorceries in his deck, and Ajani's the most expensive one. So getting to tap out against Twin is not often a luxury you can afford. I mean, it's a powerful card. It can still, You can still
play it as just a removal spell and then maybe fog a turn of attack.
Yeah, basically, Shaun's only opportunities to play it are if Dickmann taps out for a small Tarmogoyf or Scavenging Ooze early, and McLaren's on 4 lands, or much, much later when McLaren can back it up with counterspells.
There you see the Ajani Vengeance. It's lovely and foil and shiny. On the right-hand side there, there's a path to exile you can see as well.
Let's take a look at what Dickmann has to work with. We see a couple of Scavenging Users. We see the Pestermite. Well, we see one Scavenging User, Pestermite, Flame Slash, Lightning Bolt, Remand, Misty Rainforest.
This isn't exactly what Dickmann's looking for in the early game. He'd really love a Tarmogoyf that can now survive a Lightning Bolt. Because if McLaren has to use a path early, that's great for Dickmann. He gets an extra land out, and that really matters in this matchup. It looks like he's avoiding playing a Scavenging Ooze, because he could have played it last turn, and he might not want to play it until he's got enough green mana and enough creatures in the graveyard that it can also survive Lightning Bolt.
When we watched the World Championship final in Amsterdam last year between Reed Duke and Shahar Shenhar, Shahar was on blue, white, red, those colours at least, and that was all about the longer he could go, the more likely he was to win. Is there a similar dynamic here with McLaren's blue, white, red deck?
There is, but it's to a much lesser extent.
Right.
I mean, McLaren does have 2 Sphinx's Revelation in his deck, and if he eventually does resolve one for 3 or 4, then it is going to be tough for Dickmann to win. But any deck that's got Deceiver Exarch, Splinter Twin, and counterspells, you can't really say that you're a favorite against them in a long, long, long game.
Right, and it's not like the life gain will ever matter in this matchup.
Yeah, I mean, every now and then, it does give you an extra couple turns against Tarmogoyf, but for the most part, that's not exactly what the games are going to hinge on. So Dickmann, again, really looking for a Tarmogoyf here. He might, at this point, run out of Scavenging Ooze, but he's avoided doing that thus far.
And now is he trying to get the 4 mana to be able to go, to be able to remand something here, like, that's going to try to either kill or disrupt his Scavenging Ooze? Is that something he's willing to fight over with a remand?
In this kind of matchup, unless you're actually killing the opponent, you generally want to save your remands for your own spells, which is kind of funny, but it gives you a straight up 2-for-1, whereas remanding your opponent's spell just buys you a little bit of mana advantage and even on cards. In fact, remand's at its best when remanding one of your own spells that's targeted by a cryptic command.
Well, he's found another remand, and he's announced Snapcaster Mage.
And this is going to get spell snared, and we may see the remand situation you were talking about here.
Targeting Snapcaster Mage.
And there we go. And unfortunately for McLaren, he can't Snapcaster Mage the spell snare since it's not in the graveyard.
It's not in the graveyard yet. It's almost there.
So the first little salvo goes into Dickmann's favor here.
Draw 1. Go.
And this is another reason why Dickmann is so favored in this matchup, is that what he just did right now, tapping out on his main phase, he's allowed to do.
McLaren can never do this.
Yeah, McLaren has a 1-turn window to resolve an Ajani here, which is actually not that bad for him. But other than that, I mean, McLaren can't open kind of kick things off by tapping out. He can now tap out in reaction, but in general, Dickmann's the one who has control over whether the players get to tap out. This is shaping up to be a pretty interesting fight. Both players have enough land, and they both have a lot of spells.
Yeah.
So these are the kind of matches that are really, really interesting.
Dickmann will think that the more interesting the game, the more certain he is to win, because he will feel that he has seen literally everything Modern has to offer.
But has he seen Wall of Omens, Splinter Twin, Threads of Disloyalty before?
I promise, if he wins the Pro Tour, I will make that my second question after in the award ceremony, just for you. Because my guess is that no, he has not.
Demons.
There's a Johnny Vengeant, keeping him off of red mana.
Yeah, this is actually pretty decent for McLaren. Even though the whole Remand sequence gave Patrick Dickmann an extra card, there are very few situations where Johnny actually gets to come out and play, and it is actually a good threat.
Serum Visions added to Dickmann's hand.
He's unfortunately, because a Johnny correctly locked down red mana, he's not able to go Bolt, Snapcaster, Mage, Bolt to kill a Johnny.
Oh, eight actually. Yeah, of course.
There you get a look at it, Johnny Vengeant. Target permanent does not untap during his controller's next untap step. I know there have been multiple matches throughout this weekend where Shaun McLaren has ultimated his Johnny Vengeant and one-sided Armageddon his opponents.
Yeah, and I mean, that is basically the end game threat of that card.
But there are times where you're like, okay, I'll lock something down for a turn, and then I'll bolt that, and then I'll disrupt you. And
yeah, I mean, the reason that it's good in this deck is it's kind of like, against aggro, it's like a lightning helix on wheels, and against control, it's an impending doom here. You know, eventually it'll Armageddon you if you don't do anything. And meanwhile, it does kill a land every turn. I mean, or the same land rather. It keeps keeping that steam vents locked down is going to impact how Patrick has to play.
Serum Visions.
I'm not sure how much at home, depending on what speakers you're listening to us through, whether you can hear how clearly and precisely Patrick Dickmann is announcing his intentions, what part of the turn he's in, what he's doing, what he's targeting, and so on. That is not just for the Pro Tour and that he's being extra careful. That is the way Patrick Dickmann plays Magic. It's like he is the voice of the click on Magic Online. He's very, very precise about everything he does.
You notice an interesting bit of sequencing where he sacked his Scalding Tarn, get him out, and then cast Serum Visions. If you're not used to playing with the card, you always want to sack your fetch lands first, because if you scry cards to the top, you don't want to then shuffle them away.
Not necessarily a matter of thinning your deck out.
No, it's not really that. And Patrick Dickmann did it, of course, without thinking, because he already knows what he has to do here.
Path, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Path to Exile says, go away, Tarmogoyf.
Which you
please.
think Dickmann's pretty happy about.
Yeah, he gets the extra land, though right now he'd rather have the Tarmogoyf against the Ajani, and this also does even shuffle away the card he kept on top of Serum Visions, which I think was a Lightning Bolt, but depending on how confident Patrick Dickmann is about fighting a counter war here, he could try and kill Ajani, because he's got Snapcaster and he's got Bolt, so he can kick things off by bolting at a turn, then untapping and trying to resolve Snapcaster plus Bolt.
Is Shaun, with Patrick way up on 18 life still, is Shaun thinking that Ajani is his path to victory in this game? Is he focusing on that right now?
Yeah, it's definitely his best and easiest route to victory, because Celestial Colonnade kills pretty slowly and costs 6 mana every turn.
Yeah.
Well, 5 plus the Vigilance, and against a Splinter Twin deck, that's pretty rough. It's really hard to make that kill them. Dealing that 20 damage with that exposes you.
And also, if he wants the protection, maybe he wants 10 land in play before he starts doing that,
Yeah.
maybe? Somewhere around there?
Which is not a small number.
Right. Meanwhile, Lightning Bolt has put a little dent in Johnny's loyalty.
Yeah,
It resolved at the end of turn now. He's hoping to Snapcaster back that Bolt.
So it looks like Dickmann's going to want to fight over this main phase instead of waiting for McLaren to untap and have access to the full 5 mana.
Of course.
So, Shaun, let's just see what you might be picking.
It's pretty clear that it's Lightning Bolt at this point.
Yeah.
And I think this is going to work out well for Dickmann if he's got a Remand, so...
Yep.
So, Snapcaster back the other way from McLaren.
He's got a Spell Snare in his yard that he can use to counter the Snapcaster Mage.
And again,
Yeah,
Remand
fine.
showing its power here where remanding a flashback spell is very good because it just exiles the spell still and you get to draw a card.
Remind my Snapcaster Mage. Sure.
Yep. Remand my Snapcaster Mage. Sure.
Draw one.
That
back.
one I don't love.
seem a little. He actually had an opportunity to then bolt.
Yeah, because he,
And Serum Visions.
instead of remanding his own Snapcaster, if he just remands the spell snare, he ends up with the Snapcaster in play and the bolt killing a Johnny. Now we're under a situation where McLaren gets to untap all his lands again.
Okay.
Though McLaren doesn't have another counter spell to fight over it next turn.
Yeah, exactly.
McLaren draws planes. There you see the previous hand he had. He's added planes to that.
There you go. Good job, Tim.
Yeah, they do heroic work down on the floor, keeping those things updated.
Yeah, I mean, heroic, like, just keeping up with all the cards in Dickman's hand. I mean, look at that.
Yeah.
Were they even more heroic during the draft
That's
portion?
6 for me. I got 12.
Oh, and there's Celestial Colonnade attacking.
Yeah, and I like this play here because
Okay, thank you.
Dickman's tapped out, so you know he's not going to Splinter Twin you. It's rather get in your 6 damage now, and now McLaren's actually seriously considering just a Johnnying to the face because he knows it's going to die to Lightning Bolt next turn anyway.
It's just trying to evaluate, is that 3 damage a turn? Is it worth the card? That Lightning Bolt? Will the Lightning Bolt matter the other way?
It's just a matter of value, right?
Yeah.
Like, if the bolt's just going to kill a Johnny, then he's not really ultimately getting anything out of it, but he can really shorten his clock here.
Yeah, and I like doing this because
9.
you don't force Dickmann to tap out for a Snapcaster this way, but you do get damage, and putting Dickmann to 9 and having Electrolyzed Snapcaster in hand and a Colonnade in play actually does represent a fast clock.
So McLaren goes up to 21, and in the event of Dickmann doing his thing, would only therefore be infinitely dead at some point. Life not really an issue in this at the moment, certainly.
It's crazy. Dickmann has so much land in play and so many cards in hand.
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, he's gotten 2 remands off on his own spells. That's +2 cards. He's gotten a card Path, which is, basically +1 card. So
You have 3 cards in
he's also
hand, right?
Snapcaster to Serum
Yeah,
Visions.
okay.
So he does have a lot going on here.
What you are looking at on screen there is not Shaun McLaren's hand. That is Patrick Dickmann's graveyard that
Snapcaster
McLaren's
Mage.
just having another little look at. That is Shaun McLaren's hand. 3 cards. Electrolyzed Path to Exile and the Snapcaster.
Go ahead.
Flame Slash took care of Snapcaster, which is about the best that it can do in this matchup. One of the reasons it's not long for the main deck.
Land is the addition for McLaren.
How many cards?
5.
Good.
So how much longer, how often can McLaren tap out to use that Celestial Colonnade?
Well, he's kind of out of it at this point, and which is kind of unfortunate for him because if he could see Dickmann's hand, he would might be a lot more inclined to go for it. But because he can't, it's really hard to just yep, I'm going to hope you don't have Splinter Twin and just go in for it.
Sure.
Go. Go.
Is he going to Path Tarmogoyf here, or does he need to now sit on Path for the combo?
Oh, it's close. I mean, he might be thinking of just casting the Electrolyze just to try to draw some cards here, especially with Snapcaster, but looks like he's going to retain the control role and just keep killing the Tarmogoyfs as they come up.
So that's the second Tarmogoyf biting the dust, 2 Path to Exile. Just want to keep an eye
Plenty
for...
of basic lands for Dickmann here.
I was just going to ask about the lands, in fact, because lots of prettiness going on and lots of lands that are doing different things. I just wanted to ask you, Luis, whether the tectonic edge that Shaun McLaren has, is that possibly going to have any relevance in this game now? Or are we well past that stage of crimping the plans?
It's not going to cut Dickmann off of any particular mana since he's got multiple red, multiple green, etc. But at some point it could be relevant because it is the sort of thing where if Dickmann leaves up a Steam Vents and you get to kill it end of turn, maybe it reduces the amount of mana he has available on your next turn.
Right. It helps you set up when you're going to pitch a fight over something.
Also, Dickmann is out of basic lands at this point, so further Path to Exiles become a lot more value.
Yeah, Snapcastering them back is very good.
Yeah, well, the first path has the biggest cost. Afterwards, it's just like either they run out of lands or the 8th land is much less relevant than the 4th. So Path to Exile definitely gets better over time.
What is the card that just got drawn?
It looks like McLaren drew a Vendilion Click, which is a pretty huge draw. Since being able to take a look at what Dickman's got going and pressure him with Vendilion is huge.
Deep in game 1, right now we've had Tarmogoyfs in play, we've had bolts happening, we've had planeswalkers, we've had removal. Right now we've just got land.
Tarmogoyf loves seeing a planeswalker in the graveyard, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, at this point, Tarmogoyf's big enough that it only dies to Path to Exile anyway, but it is certainly relevant.
Snapcaster Mage arrived.
Scavenging Ooze?
So here's Scavenging Ooze, first time we've seen that in this one.
Which definitely is going to have to prompt a response from McLaren. Since Scavenging Ooze basically turns off his Snapcaster Mages, he's going to need to do something about that ooze in order to keep using them. One of the things he can do is actually just play Snapcaster, and if it resolves, target the path, then let ooze resolve and path the ooze. Of course, that's not going to work out all that well against Dickmann's multiple remands in hand.
Yeah, we see just a grip full of blue cards. He's got a snap flush here.
Leading with Vendilion Click's smart though, since it helps you in a counter war.
Quick.
So 4 mana spare for McLaren right now. Dickmann, you can see everything in his hand on the right of your screen.
He might want a new card.
Yeah, I mean, you get him 1 card closer to Splinter Twin.
Except I guess Pestermite's going to go away. But he could just cast Pestermite in response.
Yeah, I think Dickmann's pretty advantaged at this point. His hand is much, much better than McLaren's. Those paths are adding up. They both have similar amounts of land in play, but 2 of them were free for Dickmann, which gives him 2 extra good cards in hand.
Dickmann is thinking about that Pestermite play.
Yeah, it looks like he's considering just running it out. It's the only unique card in his hand. He has 2 copies of each other card, so that does make it so Click at least has less options.
Right. And it gives him 1 less card he needs to draw. No, it doesn't look like he's teetering somewhere between. Oh, there we go. He's casting all of them.
I think
firing them off.
Don't think that's quite what's happening.
I think Dickmann's got a hand that's good enough to play the control role. That I wouldn't have run out the Pestermite. I think just letting McLaren take it if he so chooses, and just having complete control with double Snapcaster, double Remand is a little stronger. With that Scavenging Ooze in play, you don't really need to hurry up and kill him. You can actually just kill him with the Ooze, and the Ooze also buys him a little life against Celestial Colonnade. Colonnade is coming into its own here, though. Dickmann does not have an easy way of dealing with it, even though it's very slow. Once McLaren gets to the point where he thinks Dickmann can't combo off, he is actually able to attack with it, as difficult as that is against an unknown hand.
Looks through the graveyard. He's like, how bad is Snapcaster Mage for me?
Yeah, what exactly does this do? Mostly it casts remands. It's got a hand of 4 remands.
A lot of players feel there's something almost taboo about looking at your opponent's graveyard. It almost feels like, I'm sorry to intrude, but could I just... In this game, McLaren is constantly refreshing his understanding of Dickmann's graveyard.
All right, these guys are all used to having their graveyard handled.
Yeah, I mean, even though you should kind of know what's been going on in the game, you really can't be expected to catalog like 20 cards in each player's graveyard at all times.
And the implications of those cards change constantly.
Yeah, I mean, some of them don't matter once they leave, except for Tarmogoyf or Scavenging Ooze, or then Snapcaster.
So the Pestermite that Dickmann thought about casting has indeed been chosen off the click.
Snapcaster.
Now here's Snapcaster again from McLaren. Targeting Path to Exile.
We've upgraded something to a Tarmogoyf here.
Yeah, this is going to turn out pretty well for Dickmann. He's going to be able to cast Tarmogoyf and then remand the path if he wants to. Though Click plus Colonnade actually does enough damage that Dickmann actually doesn't even answer to it.
He's at 8 here, yeah.
Interesting. I actually like how that worked. McLaren decided just not to flashback Path to Exile, knowing that Dickmann has multiple remands, and is just passing the turn instead. Or rather, passing to his turn.
I'm passing myself the turn.
So Sphinx's Revelation is in hand, but more importantly, a Celestial Colonnade is a really big flying man.
Yeah, I think McLaren is under the plan of never casting another spell this game into a bunch of remands, instead just hoping that Colonnade takes it home. It's not unreasonable, even if Vendilion Click dies here, Colonnade does 4. Scavenging Ooze can gain some life, but not enough indefinitely. It's not like it has 20 creatures to eat.
Yep.
So again, he's thinking about a Snapcaster Mage.
Snapcaster Mage.
Here it comes.
It's fine.
Targeting Lightning Bolt.
Yep.
Lightning Bolt.
And he wants to do this beginning of combat so that if McLaren has to tap Colonnade for a counterspell or something, it can't attack. Though he doesn't really have that option right now.
Sure.
So the click is gone. Lightning
And
Bolt appeared briefly and is gone again.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's
Sorry.
better. Actually gone.
Exile Snapcaster Mage.
There we go.
Sure.
Going back to 9, right?
Yep.
And a counter for my Ooze. And exile the Vendilion Click.
Go up to 10.
So God Hunches.
Yep.
So it's 4/4, and I go back to 10.
See, no possible room for not knowing what's going on when you play
Okay,
against him.
worst.
That was super clear.
Down to 6.
Down to 6.
Good.
Dickmann's going to be able to attack for a decent amount of damage with Ooze here and then play a Tarmogoyf, so he could very easily win this race and have double remand up in order to never have McLaren resolve another relevant spell.
And he can outrace the Colonnade, which... Oh, he's at 10. He's at
6 now.
He's at 6 now. The life totals haven't been updated.
But
Okay.
he does get to hit for 4 this turn, assuming the Snapcaster's trade. And he does have a Tarmogoyf, which is going to be, looks like a 5/6 next turn. Though it might have to shrink it by eating his own creatures to Ooze.
Off the Serum Visions, both go away.
Snapcaster
Both
Mage.
cards. Here's Snapcaster.
Targeting
Oh, he's even
Serum
get
Visions.
to Serum Visions, and he could
Flashback
potentially
Serum
have a target a Flame Slash and Flame Slash McLaren Snapcaster as well if he wants to.
So he draws off the Serum Visions
Scratch you.
Yep.
into scry mode. Twin and a land.
Could be fully off the Splinter Twin plan this game. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yep, they're both going away. Game 1 of the second semi-final here at Pro Tour Born of the Gods, and this has been a good one.
Yep.
Taxian Probe.
Neutralize.
Let's see what you got going on there. Well, we've known for a while Sphinx's Revelation and Electrolyze.
Now, the Sphinx's Revelation life now does matter.
Yeah, it certainly could. I mean, it's really tough to cast Revelation against a handful of remands,
Yeah.
but you would love to resolve it. Oh, drawing that Lightning Bolt is huge. I mean, Dickmann can't fully tap out because of the Revelation, but he is in reasonable shape here. He gets to attack, he gets to potentially play Tarmogoyf and have Remand up still, and then next turn be able to attack Lightning Bolt and potentially grow the Ooze to the point where he can survive 2 Colonnade hits.
Clear attacks. Attack.
No blocks.
No blocks,
Okay,
says Sean.
that's 6 for you.
6 damage.
Back to
McLaren
7.
goes
That's
to
7.
14.
Sorry, 30, I believe. 14, now we got it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Now, fully armed with knowledge of what's in his opponent's hand.
Yeah.
Sure.
And he knows that it's first of all safe to run out the Tarmogoyf, and second of all, he only needs to have 1 Remand up for Rev because unless McLaren draws something very, very cheap.
Well, Celestial Colonnade is very, very cheap, but doesn't actually do anything in terms of a spell. There you see the 3-card hand he has to work with.
No blocks. Down to 2.
Down to 2.
And if McLaren drew an untapped land here, Dickmann would have to respect the Electrolyze. Right now, he doesn't. He knows what the last 2 cards are in McLaren's hand, and he can just bolt the Snapcaster, grow the Ooze, and attack for 14.
So Dickmann is about to do the math that
This is
Luis has
5,
just
6,
done
right?
for us all.
As long as he's got
Planeswalker?
he just needs one creature in his own graveyard, which he might not have. If he doesn't have it, he's actually 1 point short because you
three.
can't grow the ooze and eat it to Tarmogoyf.
Oh, we don't have creatures.
So there's no creatures out. So it actually looks like Dickmann is a point short of winning the game here,
Wow.
which is tough because he's going to die to Ancestral Colonnade next turn. He's got some other weird outs too, where he can like attack, force the Snapcaster to block, bolt his own Snapcaster, and eat 3 creatures to ooze in order to outlive the Colonnade. So I do think things start by just
Lightning
casting
Bolt, Snap
bolt.
Custom Mage.
There's your creature.
Untap.
So he needs to draw any way to get a creature in the graveyard or any spell that does something against Colonnade.
Let's see what he draws. Pestermite.
And there we have it.
Oh, that's a fine card to draw there.
Yeah,
About as good as it gets.
that is exactly what he needed.
Quite the hand. Pestermite, remand while you're just beating your opponent down.
That is 13, I believe. 1, 2. This is 5 now. 7 plus 4 is 11 plus 2 is 13. Yeah, 13 for you.
13
one.
for you, he says.
He doesn't activate the...
Exiling the Snap Custom Mage from your graveyard. So I go to 3.
Now
And
he's
this is
putting
f-
himself
5/5?
out of range of Electrolyze. McLaren could draw a Lightning Bolt here. Because if he draws Lightning Bolt, he can get it
Go.
remanded, and then he can bolt and get it remanded, and he can't cast it again, I guess. So
McLaren draws Lightning Helix.
Activate.
Yep.
Declare Taker Step.
Yep.
Pestermite.
Pestermite in the Declare Attacker step.
Tapping your Celestial Colonnade, the one that is a creature.
I told you he was precise, Luis. Tapping your Celestial Colonnade, the one that is a creature.
now McLaren knows that Dickman's got a remand in hand. He's got a Helix for lethal, but it doesn't do anything here.
It's okay, Patrick Dickmann. We're not on the boat in 1997 here.
But you have to assume that that mannerism is for himself as much as the opponent. It's the clarity of mind, the clarity of thought, the clarity of speech.
Absolutely.
Helix you?
Helix you.
Remand.
Yep.
Remand. Yep. Patrick Dickmann uses so many cards, so much of his life. But
That's a different version of the still had all these. It's like I still had all these that you saw last turn.
that he knew about.
so there we go. Patrick Dickmann
All the digs.
takes the lead.
All the digs.
I thought that was a terrific game of Magic. I enjoyed that a lot.
Yeah, that was pretty awesome. I mean, Dickmann was ahead, I think, almost the whole game, but it turned out that last draw step, he actually did need to peel something.
Right.
Well, of course, with 2 remands in hand, any spell he can actually remand his own spell to like dig a little deeper. But he did have to draw something, and he did.
If I'm going to complain, and by the way, I am, where are my combos? Come on, where are they?
There's not a single true combo deck in the top 8.
Yeah. and we haven't seen any. We haven't seen really since we've been here anyway. Any comboing out.
It's basically all been downhill since Michael Hetrick started losing with Living End. Yep, very disappointing. But obviously, fantastic job. Patrick Dickmann won up. We should take a look at the sideboard.
Right, because if we've learned anything, once people sideboard, we're less likely to see a combo.
Exactly.
So why don't we take a look at what Patrick Dickmann is going to be up to after board. He leads 1-0, and there you see on your screen, we can just about fit them all in for you, because that, by the way, is the binary code for Fort Knox, 21211111111. 2 Ancient Grudge, Nature's Claim is there. Double Anger of the Gods, that's a card that's been very talked about this weekend. Single of Engineered Explosives, Combust, Dismember, Spellskite, Batterskull, Sword of Feast and Famine, another Ooze, Dispel, Negate, and Counterflux. Luis, you make head or tail of all that little lot, if you would.
I assume you're just going to start with Batterskull because always Batterskull.
If we've learned anything, it's that Batterskull automatically comes in. The other equipment's also very good here, Sword of Feast and Famine. I mean, McLaren does have access to a lot of removal spells, but Sword makes it so even a Snapcaster Mage is a huge threat. And if you can ever land a successful Sword hit, that puts you really far ahead. Dickmann also has access to, Dispel, Negate, Counterflux, which are all pretty wonderful in the control mirror. Most of the other cards he's got are a little more targeted. I wouldn't imagine that he wants Ancient Grudge or Anger of the Gods or anything like that, especially since he now has access to McLaren's sideboard and knows that McLaren doesn't have, say, Spellskite, which is one of the reasons you might want Ancient Grudge in an otherwise artifact-free matchup.
We've joked a fair amount about Batterskull, but it is worth mentioning that Modern is a format, not quite exclusively, but certainly is a format of very, very cheap, very, very efficient spells and creatures, not just here in the sideboard that's packed with 1s and 2s by and large, but also alternate mana costs, way to do things for free and so on. And then there is this giant, I'm just going to pay 5. And that does pay some testimony to just how good Batterskull is.
Sure. I mean, you know from doing set reviews, you see a card over a certain casting cost. At any point, and
I love it immediately.
Yeah, well, you're going to be drafting it.
Right.
But when you're talking about constructed, even once you're starting in at 5, you start to be very wary, right? You're like, whoa.
I mean,
we're talking constructed.
Let's just
here.
look at Planeswalkers specifically. The Planeswalkers that cost 5 that have been very good and constructed is a much, much, much smaller number than those that cost 4 and below.
Right.
That is the dividing line for Standard most years.
So that just gives you an idea of how ridiculous Batterskull must be for these people, for them to find a slot for it in their sideboard.
I mean, once we're not paying 2, 1 and a white for Batterskull anymore, it's still very good at 5 mana.
1 and a white, by the way, for those of you new to the game, Stoneforge Mystic used to let you do very, very filthy things with Batterskull.
Is this a card people are still figuring out? Because we got so used to being able to, air quotes, cheat it out with Stoneforge Mystic?
Yeah, I think that you've seen it a lot in sideboards this weekend, and I think that's just going to continue. It's just one of the best cards against not only Zoo, but also any attrition matchup. Because it's a 5-mana 4/4 Vigilance Lifelink. That's fairly strong, but it's actually unkillable. If they use a creature removal, you can just bounce Batterskull and replay it. You can also actually move Batterskull to your other creatures, which people don't do often enough.
Right. Do you are you old enough to remember Blinking Spirit?
I mean, I know what the card is, but I can't say that I was really playing back then.
Yeah, that's sort of 95, 96.
Yeah, something like that.
All right.
And we were happy to do it.
That's very true. That was Patrick Dickmann, his sideboard. Why don't we go across to the other side of town and see what Shaun McLaren, Arsenal Munch, can get up to from Magic Online. Here's his collection. Is it Staticaster? Couple of Relic of Progenitus. Is Stony Silence, 2 of those, a Counterflux, Timely Reinforcements. He's also got an Anger of the Gods, just 1. Threads of Disloyalty,
just 1.
That was the highlight of the morning.
Just 1
sure.
for the rubbins.
Yeah, the 1 Threads is really nice.
A Crucible of Worlds, Celestial Purge, Logic Knot, the Delve counterspell, Wear Tear, and then the extremely weirdly named Porphyry Nodes.
Otherwise known as Drop of Honey to use a timely reference.
Yeah. Yeah, so this was on the Future Shifted or
Planar Chaos.
Planar Chaos cards. Yeah. So this
color shifted cards.
Color shifted cards that are sort of functional reprints, but in a different color of classic Magic cards.
Yeah,
Magic was weird that year.
And this sideboard, McLaren actually has a couple different ways to go, since he can attack Goyfs either via Relic of Progenitus, which not only attacks Goyf, it also attacks Scavenging Ooze and Snapcaster, which I imagine has to be good in this matchup. He has his own Snapcasters he has to worry about, but he can use Relic, in a targeted fashion, just tapping it if he gets it out early enough. And then it shrinks all Goyfs down to 0/1s, makes it so Scavenging Ooze has nothing to feed on. And then on the other side, he's got Threads of Disloyalty. It actually might be worth bringing both in, even though they kind of work at cross purposes, because Threadsing a Goyf for an Ooze is also very good. Well, Threadsing an Ooze is a little less good unless it's already grown. He can't grow it himself. Right. But it's still effective. And then past that, of course, he's going to want to bring in, like Counterflux and Logic Knot. The biggest advantage that Dickmann gets is that McLaren's going to want to bring in Wear and Tear or Celestial Purge against the combo, but they're so bad at fighting all the other fights that matter that McLaren kind of has to be reactive here, even though Dickmann is likes to play into the tempo aspect.
I'm going to bring you into the world of Friday Night Magic for a moment, because most people at home may not know every pro, but most people at home know everyone at their local store. And a lot of the times at F&M, after you've played a bunch of weeks, you have a very good idea of what a lot of people are going to be playing, and also play styles within that. Now, everyone in this booth knows that Dickmann isn't really about the combo, and that he is absolutely about that's the kind of the backdoor way to win. Now, is there a sense that Shaun McLaren, who might have seen a deck tech, might just know from seeing what's been going on, that Dickmann is not all about that, and actually, in a sense, can afford to gamble slightly more that Dickmann is not all about trying to do that, and that impacts in some way his sideboard? Because if I was playing, I'd be like, there's a pretty good chance you may actually be quite a long way from trying to do that, or does he just you cannot possibly risk it, and everything is about having to stop that?
Even though he knows Dickmann prefers to like win via tempo, you still have to respect the combo to some degree. It's tough to completely ignore it. If you just start tapping out for things and then get Splinter Twin, it's like, yeah, probably should have thought of that one.
Yeah, it's just 2 cards that if he has them in his hand, you tap out, he's just like, Pestermite, untap, kill you.
That's part of the reason the tempo twin deck is so strong, is that Deceiver Exarch and Pestermite are not huge costs just to play as cards. They're fine cards. So Dickmann gets to play those cards and then have a free win in Splinter Twin, even though he doesn't really need to look for the Splinter Twin all that often.
Yeah, and also they happen right next to each other, even though they're in different turns.
Right.
They are. It's not like, well, I'm just going to spend my 3rd turn doing this, then I'm going to hang around a bit, and then on my 4th turn I'm going to do this. It's like, is it me? Have I won? Right there, and that's a lot of its power as well. The players are looking at their opening hands. They're trying to work out whether they can keep 7. And Shaun McLaren 1-0 down again, just like Ansi Alkio before him, has to be super careful here. But McLaren is going to keep his opening 7. So Dickmann now takes a look. Dickmann very helpfully showing Tim Willoughby what's going on with his opening 7. And both players have kept. So why don't we get back down to the floor for game 2 of our second semi-final. There we are again. McLaren on the left, Dickmann on the right. Dickmann 1 game away from the final.
And looks like McLaren boarded in Porphyry Nodes. So that should be pretty interesting. If Dickmann plays a couple creatures out, McLaren could get a nice little 2-for-1 just by playing Porphyry Nodes, taking a little bit of damage, and then wiping both of Dickmann's creatures.
Porphyry
He
Nodes.
also played Relica Progenitus on turn 1, which we talked about from the sideboard. It doesn't look like he has a second land. So he kept a pretty small hand here.
Yeah, well, his hand has all cards that cost 1 or 2 mana, and Relic even cycles, so he shouldn't be stuck here for too long. It's still a pretty big disadvantage.
Yeah.
Down a game, too.
Which, yeah, shouldn't impact your hand keeping, but it's definitely something you think about later.
It's bold.
You don't think you need to be a little more conservative when you're up against the edge of the cliff?
No, I think if you do that, you actually end up just costing yourself in the long run. Like,
Okay.
either the play is right or it's right. I mean, the game count is just like a metagame thing. It's out of the game.
Sure.
It doesn't actually affect your chances of winning or losing a specific game.
Well, there is no second land right now for Shaun McLaren.
But
Double
he
path
is
to
going to be
exile.
able to play...
Yeah, he could play a Porphyry Nodes here and just trade it for the Scavenging Ooze and take 2. Or he could just cycle the Relic to try to find a land here. If he misses, he ends up having to discard, which is pretty rough.
Yep, so he's going to send out Porphyry Nodes. There you see it. Beginning of your upkeep. Destroy the creature with the least power.
So it also keeps Dickmann from playing a creature this turn.
It does. It makes it so Dickmann has, not only no incentive, but actually gets punished for playing a creature. Not that it looks like he has a creature to play to begin with.
Let's take a look at his hand.
Declare attacks. Epic.
And Dickmann's got to be really happy with this. I mean, when you're playing in the popular approach and your opponent doesn't play a land on turn 2, then you're not usually too unhappy about that.
So Nodes just goes 1-for-1 with Scavenging Ooze.
I
Looks
believe
like a
we do
Scalding
have a
Tarn.
land. Yes, there we go.
And suddenly, McLaren's hand gets turned on.
Yeah, he's got now
Good.
3 2-mana counters, and Dickmann doesn't actually have much in the way of pressure, which is good for McLaren. I mean, when you're stuck on lands, you want your opponent to have a long game hand, not a short game hand.
Now, what do you think his decision to keep here was based on? I mean, he's like, I'm going to draw a second land. I play so much mana in this deck. I'm certainly going to get there. Or did the Porphyry Nodes and the Relic of Progenitus, cards he thought of enough to bring in from his sideboard, did that impact his decision to keep this?
I think it was a combination of like him having 4 or 5 cards that cost 1 or 2 mana, and then also having Relic of Progenitus, which does let you cycle it if you need to, and Porphyry Nodes, which is a good early play.
Sounds like we're getting a little bit of a rundown on how these players might have sideboarded.
Snapcaster Mage.
This is also known as the Plan B, just running out the Snapcaster with no targets. I mean, against a Relic of Progenitus, you're not really expected to have too much anyway. So now it's time to cast Ambush Viper and attack. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if McLaren actually countered it. You don't want to just take 6 damage off a Snapcaster, and you certainly don't want to path it. Yeah. So I like mana leaking here. Remanding is also not exactly great just because it gives you an extra card for land. That part is very good. But sending it back to Dickmann's hand and letting him cast it later when there is a spell is not quite as good as just countering it.
So it sounds like all the lightning bolts have gone from Shaun McLaren's collection. Is it Statocasters come in, Relic of Progenitus? Of course, we've seen that. Threads of Disloyalty. You'd bring that in forever if you'd done what you'd done earlier today. Logic Not seems to have come in. So we see Mana Leak from McLaren.
How do you like Is it Staticaster here?
It's interesting. I mean, it kills all the Snapcasters, but it also kills Pestermite. So I could see that it being better than a Bolt if a Bolt was just going to trade for those cards straight up.
Draw.
Lightning bolts have not come out from Patrick Dickmann's side because he's just drawn one.
Lightning Bolt you.
I'd just like to lightning bolt you. And then here's Snapcaster Mage.
We're on the straight up just lava spike you plan.
Sounds like Dickmann sided out the combo entirely.
Yeah, he's got a Splitter Twin in his hand, but I think it's the last one, just to put the fear of combo into McLaren here. But other than that, it looks like he's trying to play a mid-game deck.
Patrick Dickmann has an infinitely different deck than he began with. Oh, I'm so sad. No Splinter Twin, the 3 of those have gone, 3 Pestermite have gone, a Deceiver Exarch's gone away, and all sorts of things have come in. An Ancient Grudge, a Nature's Claim, Combust, Dismember, Batterskull, Sword of Feast and Famine.
Which member?
Dismember, pay attention, Scavenging Ooze, Dispel, Negate, Counterflux, all coming in. So a very different package. It's something that Dickmann said when he won his Modern Grand Prix in Antwerp. Just most of the time, I'm a control deck.
And there we go. We have to Path to Exile a Snapcaster Mage.
And that's one of the benefits that Dickmann gets off being so aggressive with his Lightning Bolt is, with McLaren at 9, how many times can you really afford to get hit by Snapcaster Mage?
So he got to do 6 and Rampant Growth for 1 in a blue.
And make McLaren discard a good card.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would say that ended up working out pretty well.
I would like to play that blue RR1. Do 6, fetch a land.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know, cryptic ultimatum of some kind.
What was that card you wanted to design? Cryptic Remand?
Cryptic Remand.
Blue, 2.
I don't know what it does. I just wanted to call it Cryptic Remand.
It's just like all the modes of Cryptic plus Remand.
And draw.
Oh, and there's a sword.
Yep, that came in. The Sword of Feast and Famine. Protection from
Sword of
black-green,
Feast and
+2/+2. If it ever hits, make them discard, and you untap all your lands.
Yeah, and it's not really what Dickmann wanted to draw here. He's running it out, tapping out of Cryptic, which I think is fine since McLaren's pretty far away from casting much. But Dickmann actually is out of creatures, and some of the, at this point, McLaren's hand is actually a little stacked. He's actually drawn a couple lands, and when you're mana screwed, drawing lands actually puts you in a pretty good spot. I mean, you end up with lands and spells.
See, he's got a Snapcaster Mage, a Path to Exile, a Mana Leak, and a Remand of his own here. And he just added a Lightning Helix to that mix.
Which is good. That's going to kill the first creature that Dickmann plays. I mean, Goyf and Scavenging Ooze don't really survive that.
17, correct?
Speaking of which, McLaren actually wants to start, once Dickmann runs out of cards in his graveyard, wants to start relicking himself. You want to discard or exile the Porphyry nodes in the land for sure. You have no way to use them, and it makes future Tarmogoyfs smaller. You especially don't want enchantments to be in the graveyard. You want instants to stay there because you have your own Snapcaster mages,
Sure,
but
yeah.
there's no reason to leave like a Porphyry node sitting in your graveyard unless you think you're going to thread the disloyalty of Tarmogoyf or something.
The thing with the blue-white-red decks is that anytime you have more than 3 cards in hand, every hand looks like it's amazing because it's just so stacked full of MTG All-Stars. That's a phenomenal collection of 5 spells.
Yeah, the mana leaks are losing value dramatically as the game goes on, especially since Dickmann just keeps drawing lands.
Yeah.
But remands are always going to be good, and even mana leak, they can team up to double mana leak a spell and turn into a real counter.
That looks like a colonnade, so that will come down tapped.
Good.
If both players just draw 5 more land in a row, then McLaren's definitely going to win.
Bold prediction. Here you get a look at the Relic of Progenitus that Shaun McLaren has been kind of, I mean, not that it's had a huge impact on the game, but it has implications as the game drags on. It makes the top of Dickmann's deck worse.
Yeah, and I mean, it did force Dickmann to run out of Snapcaster with nothing and to main phase a Snapcaster for Lightning Bolt for no value except just straight damage.
Right.
Which, I mean, that did change how Dickmann played it. It did make those Snapcasters worse. Do you think McLaren would rather have a Relic of Progenitus in play or a Progenitus?
That sounds like a Magic question I might know the answer to. That's exciting.
I mean, Progenitus isn't modern. He could have put either in his deck.
Go.
Oh. A slightly terse sounding go from Dickmann.
He might be getting frustrated by, his lack of creatures. He's got a decent amount of creatures in his deck, and his hand, is set up for a battle here.
Yeah, we've definitely seen that Dickmann's an emotional player.
Yes. Yep.
And there, look at you, Luis. There goes the Porphyry nodes. Removed from the graveyard with Relic of Progenitus.
McLaren draws, and his hand is starting to look super nice. Look at that.
Is there some point where he would ever
Go.
run his Snapcaster Mage out there and start just attacking, or is he just going to sit there and craft his hand?
I think given that McLaren has control over the Relic, that he's not going to want to just do it for no value. I think getting the Helix, I mean, the fact that he's casting Helix here kind of signifies his intent to eventually start Snapcastering. Yeah. Also, since McLaren hasn't been drawing lands, Dickmann's been doing that for the both of them, he's going to have to start potentially discarding, which you really don't want to do.
Which also gets McLaren back into double-digit life totals.
Yeah, which is a nice place to be. I mean, the life totals are actually even. Helix is a nice little 6-point swing.
Go.
Remand into Dickmann's hand.
Yeah, I mean Dickmann's hand is Bolt, Combust, Negate, Remand.
7 for me.
Wait, is that 4 remands?
Looks like 3 remands.
3 remands and
a
a Negate. Jeez.
And a Combust, which is going to be really nice later. It's going to kill a Celestial Colonnade, which is the intent.
Good.
7 for you as well, right?
Yep.
Now that McLaren has 7 cards, if Dickmann does not do anything on his turn, I would expect McLaren to run out Snapcaster Mage.
Go.
You don't really want to risk discarding here.
You said that Combust is going to come in useful later. Is later quite a lot later? Are we in for a long haul here?
Yeah, I mean, unless Dickmann can stick a creature and win with Sword quickly, I don't expect that McLaren's going to be activating a Celestial Colonnade anywhere within the next 3 or 4 turns.
Sure. So Snapcaster Mage is going to target Lightning Helix.
McLaren considering whether or not to play Helix into Remand here.
Chooses not to.
Sure.
Okay.
Just wants a body and to start turning it sideways at the moment.
He's just added threads of disloyalty to his spell book here.
His MVP so far.
Yeah.
Lightning Bolt Snapcaster Mage.
I'd like that to be dead, says Patrick Dickmann, and McLaren is not going to argue with that at all, and he passes the turn.
Draw.
It's kind of minor. I'd like tapping Relic during Dickmann's upkeep, just in case he drew a Snapcaster Mage. Unlikely to come up at this point, but...
Scavenging ooze.
Dickmann finally got what he wanted, which was to start a fight over a creature. I mean,
Right.
this is going to force a response from McLaren one way or the other, and Dickmann's got 5 counter spells, you know, burning a hole in his pocket here.
Any temptation from McLaren here to let this, you know, think about threads of disloyalty? Is he going to...
The only problem with that is that if he loses the fight off threads, Dickmann gets to then equip swords. So I think what you want to do is fight now and then try to, if that doesn't work, threads on your turn. I think it's excessively risky to just let it resolve and not tap any mana now and then just start the fight by tapping 3 mana. I mean, without the sword, the ooze wouldn't be a big deal, but sword is quite good here.
And no real way for McLaren to interact with that sword.
No, I mean, he might have, I mean, he very well could have sided in Wear Tear. I wouldn't have been surprised, but if he didn't, then
Don't think he did.
yeah, he's gonna have to just kill all of Dickmann's creatures one by one.
Helix.
Okay.
So we're at the same place we were before. Here's a Snapcaster. I'm going to target my Lightning Helix. Is that okay? Sure. Dickmann looking very carefully at how he's going to husband his mana here.
Equip.
He's gonna force the fight by equipping with the sword. I actually don't love this equip here, since I think just passing with a bunch of mana up is a little better, because now...
I mean, he can't be putting McLaren on nothing.
Yeah, and it doesn't protect from Path to Exile or anything like that. So now McLaren gets to cast Helix in response, Dickmann gets to remand, McLaren gets to cast Mana Leak, Dickmann gets to remand again. Eventually this ooze ends up with the sword, but Dickmann's tapped out, and then McLaren gets to untap and threads it.
Helix.
Remand.
Yeah, because it's converted mana cost. Doesn't matter how big it is.
Take a look at Sword of Feast and Famine here.
And Sword of Feast and Famine, if it's on the Scavenging Ooze, even if McLaren takes it, it says whenever it deals damage to a player, that player discards a card. So Dickmann would get to untap all his lands, but he would also have to discard a card. So it's a kind of strange incentive when your opponent has your sword. And even though you can't normally equip your opponent's creatures, if they steal an equipped creature, the equipment travels with them. And if Dickmann doesn't draw another creature, he can't actually de-equip the ooze.
That's one of the more miserable feelings in Magic.
Cards in hand for you.
5.
5 cards in hand for McLaren.
And we know that minus the Mana Leak, these are
Remand
they.
Mana Leak.
Remand mana.
Oh, no, that is still them.
So yeah, this is just playing out where, you know, Dickmann ended up being tapped out. Two new cards in hand.
Do you any considerations of just remanding the Lightning Helix there again instead of the Mana Leak?
I mean, you draw one less card, but then McLaren ends up with no Mana Leak in hand. I think Mana Leak's actually weak enough right now that a random card off Dickmann's deck is a little better than a Mana Leak. It is close, though, since, again, Mana Leaks do team up in a quite effective fashion.
So McLaren shuffling his Threads of Disloyalty to the front of his substantial and substantive grip.
Yeah. I believe he actually refers to that as his lucky Threads of Disloyalty now, ever since his quarterfinal matchup.
I would like to steal this.
Let's see.
I don't know if oozes are known for being particularly loyal to begin with.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have that. Okay.
Then I'll pop in.
11 all.
Ooze in control here.
Oh dear.
I don't know if you want to start this.
I think we both know that we do want to start this.
We just know
Rich is
we
just
can't
gonna
end
finish
it.
Yeah.
We're destined to lose.
So Dickmann's still in okay shape here. I mean, he's still got Cryptic Command, which gets you out of basically any situation. He still has Negate, and he still has another Remand. So he's still got a lot of tools which to fight things with. Like he can bounce the ooze back to his hand, getting rid of the threads.
Sure, he could bounce the threads if he wanted to fight over that later. I mean, it doesn't seem as likely.
Yeah, I mean that's better in like a shorter game, like bouncing the threads end of turn to get the ooze back and immediately start attacking. He's probably not going to want to get hit by the ooze, even if it does come with a free untap.
If you love interactive Magic, when we get to see this many powerful cards in those two hands, this is just fantastic as a way to play the game.
Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty awesome game. It didn't look like it necessarily was going to be when McLaren didn't play a second land.
Yeah.
But it's come a long way since then, and I think we're in for an interesting couple turns here.
Right. Yeah, I mean, worth going back and reminding people, Shaun McLaren kept a one-land hand with Porphyry Nodes, Relic of Progenitus,
Path to Exile
Path
was in
to
there.
Exile, and a handful of inexpensive blue counter magic.
A couple of mana leaks, think was a remand in that opening grip. Yeah.
Go.
And Dickman's actually drawn the Deceiver Exarch to go with his one Splinter Twin, which could change things. I mean, McLaren's been kind of fast and loose with tapping out, which I think is right. I mean, he's played the game aggressively, which he needs to, but Dickmann actually has drawn the Yahtzee, the two-card combo that wins him the game. So if McLaren's not careful, he could get taken by surprise here.
Tectonic Edge comes down for Shaun McLaren.
Declare.
Declare.
All right.
Oh, I just love listening to Dickmann the way he does this. Yep, all right. Away you go. In you come.
Judge, what happens when
Talking about the sword here,
I
I'm
hit
sure.
him with sort of Feast and Famine?
No shame there, Shaun. I had to look it up, too.
What happens when I hit him with sort of Feast and Famine? Who untaps and discards?
It's interesting that Dickmann is just sitting there silently and he's not offering any explanation about anything.
Well,
Perhaps when he was overselling something earlier.
yeah.
This is the opposite.
Randy in the booth said something about some people are really good at selling things and other people are not.
Basically, where McLaren gets into the most trouble here is A, if he fights too much over a cryptic command, or B, if he ends up tapping out for or tapping down for an Ajani Vengeance. But other than that, I mean, he might have enough protection to stop Dickmann from comboing with path, leak, remand. That's a lot of disruption.
Yeah. Taken from my flatmates Highlander deck.
You're looking at McLaren's hand there.
No. You have
Oh, it looks like
6,000 hand,
it's a combust, not a Splinter Twin.
Yeah, 6. How about you?
Yeah, so just to confirm, Dickmann's notional infinite combo, Deceiver Exile and Splinter Twin, he left in a couple of Deceiver Exile, took one out, took 3 of his 4 Splinter Twin out. He does not have that 4th Splinter Twin in hand right now. Has the Deceiver Exile though?
Yeah, so Dickmann does have one in post board, but currently does not have access to it.
Yeah.
Will I discard a card?
Still resolving sword ooze triggers, so no.
And will I untap?
That player discards a card.
Yeah, and
Did the judge
So
just
he
rule
untapped?
incorrectly?
Yes.
He untaps and discards?
The controller of the sword
Okay.
taps, and the person who receives the combat damage.
Okay.
discards.
okay, so yeah.
There you go. There we go. Okay, good.
So I mean, I think overall you still want to hit with the sword here. Like if you can, you can, because I mean, Dickmann's got what 10 lands in play. I don't think he can do anything with 20 mana unless he's got Volcanic Geyser somewhere in his deck.
That would be the sickest Sphinx's Revelation of all time.
So we're right back where we were, which was in the declare attacker's step
Yeah, didn't
of
you say
Shaun
it's
McLaren.
okay to call
The
that?
last word that happened within the game was
you switch to
declare.
to the beginning of combat step.
That is correct. We're inside combat. He said declare.
I think
I believe you.
I think
And
Dickmann
then asked.
already let him attack.
Did I allow him?
No,
didn't allow him.
that was.
He said he was ready to attack, and he said it was okay.
McLaren said declare attackers, and Dickmann
well,
said okay.
It was just the word
It was good.
declare was spoken by McLaren, and then he asked the question of the judge. I don't recall hearing Dickmann say anything at that point.
Yeah, I think he asked the judge after Dickmann said okay. At least that's what I remember hearing.
Sure.
Either way, I think Dickmann's going to want to maybe cryptic the ooze anyway, which doesn't matter whether it's attacking or not.
Right.
And he does have the tools to win a fight here. It's close though. Let's say he'll have 6 mana up. Actually, McLaren, if Dickmann pays full retail for both mana leaks, McLaren actually does win that fight. But Dickmann then untaps all his lands, which is a bizarre interaction.
Not quite as bizarre as Threads' disloyalty on the Wall of Omens with the twin on.
I think McLaren actually timed his judge call well, because he asked the question after he already had permission to attack, before deciding whether to attack or not, which is smart. I mean, it doesn't give away his intentions without also giving away that he, wants to make sure he knows how Sword works, which is a smart idea.
So let's see what Dickmann does here. Deceiver Exarch. If you're Shaun McLaren, are you feeling a little bit fluttery right now when you see that part of the combo? He, of course, doesn't know how much is gone of the combo, and certainly doesn't know that Dickmann does not have Splinter Twin in hand right now.
He's got to respect it, but he doesn't know. It looks like Dickmann wants to pick off a Snapcaster Mage here. I mean, that is one of the options here by playing it at this point.
Is he also looking to maybe draw out a Path to Exile?
Yeah,
and get an extra land that untaps at the end of this combat step.
He only has one basic left in his deck, so he doesn't have he doesn't get a ton of value off Path to Exile. I mean, he gets one here, but he won't get another one.
Untap island.
Yep.
Untaps his island.
Fetch.
Fetch.
Nice.
So he's fetching here because, and that indicates to me that he wants to cast Cryptic, drawing a card, and he wants to get a land out of his deck first. Though he's fetching a basic, which actually means that Path no longer gets him a free card. So
Oh, wow.
I wonder how much he's considered whether he needs the extra mana and could put into play a tapped land instead. Though
Maybe he doesn't have any of those left either.
Just looking back at his deck list, he's got no fetchable lands left. So, well, it looks like we're getting a basic.
Bounce Scavenging Ooze draw.
Yeah. So here's the reclaiming of the Scavenging Ooze. I think at the end of this combat, McLaren's pretty happy. At the end of this chain of events,
He might be able to stick in a Johnny Vengeant here.
yeah. I mean, I think he could lead with a remand, which is great on a a 4-mana spell like Cryptic, and now his mana leaks are both instantly live if Dickmann fights over that. Dickmann can't be feeling too good about this spot since his own remand is much worse against McLaren's 2-mana spell with 7 lands in play, 5 untapped, and fighting over a negate really puts yourself in a tough spot against the mana leak that's sitting in McLaren's hand right now.
Ooh, big moments this.
What do you guys do sitting at home?
That's fine.
Wonder why your own combats don't take this long?
You're probably a little less
declare
precise, but
Before blocks.
And drawn another path off of the remand.
mana leak again still very effective here. Dickmann knows if he casts negate, which is tempting, it just gets mana leaked. And the play of negate, remand my own negate is not as effective when important things have to resolve this turn. That's more of like an incremental value play.
And also he's down to 3 cards here.
And he's about to be down to 1 less once that sword hits him. The fact that he has no land to get, it's also just like a minor annoyance. It doesn't change a whole lot here, but it's just like one little edge that he's not getting. I mean, a lot of these things add up, and Dickmann's just losing a lot of little incremental battles at this point, and soon about to be in a tough spot. So
He's thinking about
Path to Exile.
yeah, this is gonna draw almost certainly a mana leak. I mean, McLaren has more paths,
How many cards?
but mana leak is much less valuable than path at this stage in the game.
Mana leak negate.
There it is.
Remand negate.
Remand the negate.
And again, trading a mana leak for a negate plus a random card is a pretty good deal.
Right.
Draw 1.
Yep.
Looks like McLaren is just going to let everything happen, get a sword hit in, and keep a couple mana up.
Helix you.
Okay.
Helix you.
Wow.
There we go.
You go.
It's over.
Yep.
Wow. Shaun McLaren, in the most intricate of fashions,
Yeah, that was impressive.
takes it down and squares us at one apiece.
Yeah, sits on one land for a couple of turns.
Yeah, I think he played. He didn't play his extra land until like turn 3 or 4.
Yeah. Yeah, he played Porphyry Nodes. He played
Relic.
and then he played a land. Yeah.
So that's like turn 4.
Yeah, and it's so easy to just collapse under that, and just great job by Shaun McLaren coming back and winning what really felt like, and a lot of times looking at Dickman's hand, an unwinnable game for him.
Yeah, he had a couple things. Shaun McLaren had a couple things go in his favor.
Sure.
The main one was when Dickmann had all the counter spells and Shaun was stuck on land, Dickmann had no threats. If Dickmann had just one threat around turn 5, 6, 7, I think he would have been able to use his Remands and Negate and Cryptic to push through.
Right.
Instead, they didn't start getting into fights until McLaren had around 6 lands in play, which actually gave him enough room to maneuver.
And the Relic of Progenitus,
Yeah.
changed the pattern of play. Again, we talked about in the last semifinal match we watched, like altering people's sequence of plays. It certainly had that impact on that game.
Yeah, and I like that McLaren never cracked the Relic. He just sat on it the whole time, and was able to just use it to gain incremental advantage and use it to affect Dickmann's play basically the whole game without ever needing the extra card off it.
Yeah.
I want to do a little bit of magic history with you both, gentlemen. The last time we were in this building, in this city, 2007, the only time that day one of a Pro Tour was ever abandoned due to flooding, as it turned out. That meant we played an awful lot of rounds. It was 10 rounds on day one. There were another 4 on day 2 before the cut to top 8. In all my time at the Pro Tour, I've never seen anyone more shattered than Remy Fortier in the final of Pro Tour Valencia in 2007. He was absolutely at the limits of human thought. Let's just think about Jacob Wilson for a moment, who, as we know, is sitting there, out there, somewhere, getting ready for his final. Is he cheering on Shaun McLaren in that game too? Because it feels to me like there's a ton of mental energy going into this semi-final.
Yeah, I think that Jacob would rather not play against the twin deck that also has Scavenging Ooze in it, because Ooze is a good card against Melira, especially when backed with like Tarmogoyf. I mean, Kitchen Finks is just going to have a much harder time beating down a deck with Tarmogoyfs.
Right.
And Patrick Dickmann still has the combo. So I think that Jacob would rather take his chances at grinding out blue-white-red control rather than playing against a twin deck that has Scavenging Oozes.
Okay, well, one of the cards in that blue-white-red control of Shaun McLaren is another iconic card from Magic history, and that is Lightning Helix. Why don't we take a little look at that card for you? For those of you who have not been around since 2006, well, I can tell you that it's been a pretty special card. There it is.
I don't think I could manage the high-pitched squeal necessary to fully convey what this card means in Magic history.
What's on the top of the deck? As he didn't say like that at all.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things Lightning Helix does is make other burn spells look pretty anemic. And when Dickmann is bolting McLaren multiple times and McLaren's responding by helixing, it's like one of those two players got an advantage there.
Let's work it out. Yeah. So very much, and even flavorful, because it's Ajani who says, Rage is not the answer. Rage followed by Fitting Vengeance is the answer, and Ajani Vengeance is still... Are you surprised to see Ajani Vengeance staying put in McLaren's deck after game 1? You didn't seem to not like it hugely game 1.
I wasn't a huge fan game 1, but Relic of Progenitus does keep Tarmogoyf and Scavenging Ooze under control. That being said, it feels like he's got a lot of different options he could go with.
I love having people down on the floor watching what people are doing with sideboarding. BDM, what have we just heard in our ears?
Well, it sounds like after that game, Shaun McLaren has decided Wear Tear is probably a card he needs to ding up some swords that are going to present a problem.
Sword actually worked pretty well for him that game.
And what's gone then?
It sounds like he took the Ajani Vengeance out for it.
Actually goes at that point. Then.
That's the extraneous card. I didn't, and I think we have a little insight into what Dickmann has sideboarded as well, but I didn't catch it from the floor.
Okay.
It looks like a lightning bolt went out for engineered explosives.
Oh, okay.
Explosives deals with threads. If you play it on 3, it could also deal with Relic of Progenitus, which isn't a great exchange.
It just forces you to pop the Relic.
But Relic is really powerful, so even if you're losing a card, it's better than losing all your Tarmogoyfs and Snapcasters.
So, we're back to the the game of working out what we think's going to happen in Game 3? Are we in exactly the same position we were an hour or so ago, or do we feel we know a little bit more about how this plays out now we've seen the two decks going, well, really head-to-head, and it is head-to-head. It's grindy, tiny little edges here and there.
I like McLaren's chances more now that I've seen how his deck plays out once he has access to Relic of Progenitus, because it looks like Dickmann is going with the kind of like beat-down, mid-range, control plan, like the plan that involves not comboing very much. That actually is McLaren's game. I think McLaren does want to play that game. He'd much rather play that than the, you just have counterspells in the combo pieces. So, once you have Relic of Progenitus, which really gives him a cheap answer to a lot of Dickmann's cards, I think that McLaren's got a better shot than I thought initially.
If you're in Dickmann's seat, do you actually contemplate, hey, never mind this grindy mid-range nonsense, let's become an honest-to-God combo deck again and actually bring them all back in? I know that's not what he's doing, but is that something you would contemplate at this point in the match?
I think it's worth considering that, maybe Tarmogoyf is not, the plan you want as much against a bunch of Relics. But Relic is so good against you that maybe you just, grin and bear it and just go with if he draws a Relic, then that's not great. Maybe I can kill it. He's got, Dickmann has Ancient Grudge. Ancient Grudging a Relic is actually fine, because if they have to use it in response, your Grudge still goes to the graveyard and is ready to hit the next one.
So, bad news for Dickmann fans. Only a little bit of bad news. It's a single mulligan. He is going to go to 6 right now. Right. So we see what that does. Modern in general.
Shaun McLaren, by the way, has his hands on his lap and his cards in front of him. He's ready to go with 7. Yeah.
Is Modern a format, just taken across all the 20, 30 decks you can play reasonably, a format that does mulligan well?
It's funny because Modern's a format where the die roll is way more important than other formats, and the mulligan is way less important. You can easily mulligan to 4 or 5 and just win, if Zoo mulligans to 5 and goes turn on Wild Nacatl, turn 2 Wild Nacatl Curdape, sometimes they just win. Yep. If Pod mulls to 5 and has turn 2 Kitchen Finks, turn 3 Birthing Pod, So more Modern is a format dominated by these really powerful synergies, and those formats tend to not need as many cards in hand.
Right. Now, I know from looking at Twitter earlier that I've been told not to look at Patrick Dickmann shuffling. And I've made so much progress. I've got to look away. Chris Bakula was commenting on Twitter that he actually he's a little sad that we don't show the mulligan decision process.
Oh, sure.
That's something that's really interesting to him. I imagine you sitting at home might like to see that as well. I can tell you what Shaun McLaren's hand is to open this, and we could talk about what his decision was. I mean, it looks like he has a hand of Island, Relic Progenitus, Lightning Helix, Counterflux, Cryptic Command, Arid Mesa, and Celestial Colonnade. Is that keep, snap keep, easy keep?
Well, it's like his last hand, except you exchange 2 spells for 2 land, which makes it great.
So he's at 3 land, 4 spells there, right?
It's 3 land, 4 spells. All the spells are pretty good, including the turn 1 Relic, which I think is one of his best opening plays. And so I think it's a pretty easy keep on his part.
Right now, 6 pink sleeves are being shuffled face down onto the table for Dickmann to take a look at. And we'll see whether
that is not a keep. That's an easy mulligan. We saw no lands in that hand.
He had Batterskull, though.
He had Batterskull. It was Batterskull, and it looked like 3 Serum Visions or 2 Serum Visions.
Yeah, some combination of Remand, Serum Visions, and Snapcasters, which is kind of what you want to see. Snapcaster, Serum Visions is one of Dickmann's best early plays, but in general, you got to start somewhere. If he had 1 island in that hand, he would have kept the Serum Visions.
For sure.
It's pretty easy.
So let's assume, put yourself in the Dickmann chair again. You're mulliganing to 5. What 5 are you looking for? Give me the best case-ish.
I would say Serum Visions, Snapcaster, and lands is pretty close to optimal. Maybe a Serum Visions into Tarmogoyf. Though, again, the fact that McLaren's going to play a turn on Relic of Progenitus makes all of Dickmann's potential good hands much less enticing.
Can you kill a Tarmogoyf with an Electrolyze for 1? Can you I guess you can, because you do it and then you can remove your own.
You can if there's no cards in the graveyard, you can Electrolyze 1 and 1. Then Electrolyze goes to the graveyard. Then you remove it with Relic. Then
and it just dies. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember I had a pretty cool play in a Tarmogoyf mirror once. I attacked with my Goyf. My opponent blocked, and then I flashed back Cabal Therapy, removing a sorcery, so both Goyfs died, which is what I wanted. but
well, as long as it was what you wanted, I'm pleased for you.
It was. So I remember
Richie's horrified at the idea of losing his Tarmogoyf here.
So I remember being in Dickmann's spot once, mulling to 5 in the semis of a Pro Tour, and then my match got held for 25 minutes as Rich went to the news desk.
Yeah, I miss not being able to do that to people. It's very sad.
So I had to look at my 5-card hands against actually another commentator, Simon Gertzen.
That's right.
Knowing
Yep.
I wasn't going to win.
Yep.
At this point, I just like complaining to Rich about it for
Yeah,
value.
of course.
But
We know that a lot of you watching the European Grand Prix coverage, we always get asked, when is Luis going to come and do coverage for us? Maybe something slightly along those lines may be coming your way sometime later this year, but we'll
stay tuned.
stay tuned.
I don't mean to sound bored by this, but yeah, just wanted to say
We're
sound
about to see
bored.
5 cards, though, so that is something very exciting.
5 cards. What do we have?
Boy,
We have
No
Dickmann
land?
potentially keeping a no-land hand.
Yeah.
He's got a Gataxian Probe, and he has
Oh,
5-card
boy.
hand. And I don't think it's unreasonable to think about. You're not excited. You don't want this
Let's
hand.
tell people, it's a Gataxian Probe. Is that a Dismember?
It is.
Gataxian Probe,
Cryptic
Dismember.
Command, Remand, and is that Snapcaster on
It
the
is
left?
Snapcaster Mage, which
Okay.
is part of the incentive.
He's
They're
keeping it.
Keeping a no-land hand. Roll the dice. If you want a good game, now's the time to
Yeah.
think for Dickmann. Here we go. Game 3, semi-final 2, Pro Tour Born of the Gods.
Jeez.
There they are. Dickmann gets ready to go. We already know that McLaren has a decent hand. What do we draw?
Oh, we drew
Land.
his land.
Did Dickmann choose to draw?
18.
Well, yeah, I guess Dickmann did
he
choose
did.
to draw.
No, that makes this hand much more
Fascinating.
keepable. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do like this keep then. I mean,
Helix.
I think it was reasonable on the play, but it's so much better on the draw, and he's getting rewarded now by drawing a land.
So you see the 4 cards that are sitting there in Dickmann's hand. The Snapcaster, Remand, Dismember, and Cryptic Command. Meanwhile, he is looking at everything that Shaun McLaren has. We already know the Relic, the Lightning Helix, the Counterflux, the Cryptic Command, and those 3 land. A terrific opening hand for McLaren. And as you're watching this game develop, remember that Dickmann begins 2 cards down in a game that has been super grindy thus far with little edges here and there. 2 cards is enormous.
And he kept a no-land hand. He could
Chose to
potentially
draw.
not play a land in the top 4 of the Pro Tour.
Chose to draw, kept a no-land hand. So this is, here comes the Relic of Progenitus.
Which, there's no way for McLaren to do exactly what he wants here, which is remove the probe before the Misty Rainforest hits the bin, since it's a cost. So Dickmann gets to protect his probe, which lets him cast Snapcaster turn 2, forcing
Oh,
McLaren
wow.
to either break the Relic or let Dickmann draw an extra card.
Right.
Lets him sort of tiptoe away from the edge of the cliff, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, Dickmann's actually not in terrible shape. I mean, obviously being down 2 cards is pretty rough, but he's got a good hand. He's got a couple lands. I don't think this game is anywhere near over.
You said, BDM, that he was a very emotional player. You have to think his heart absolutely pounding.
My heart was pounding. What are
Yeah.
you talking about?
Yeah, I mean, that's exciting.
Oh, wow.
I once saw, I think, Ben Rubin keep a no-land hand in a Grand Prix top 8.
I was
that he
there. That
won.
was my first Grand Prix, actually,
Yeah.
at GP Anaheim. He kept a no-land hand with Chrome Mox and Chill against Mono Red, and then played like a turn 2 Chill. Because he just
He
didn't do
bricked
anything.
for a turn, yeah.
And then he drew a land and played a Chill and won the game.
Yeah. That was Dump Truck.
Yep, that was aptly named. We just call it Esper now. I'm all in favor of clarity, but names have gotten less sweet.
Got almost finished this weekend.
So I'm a little surprised that Dickmann didn't force the Relic here. Like,
Sure.
I would really like to run out Snapcaster, and if that's what he's got in hand, it looks like he does, yeah. So forcing the Relic here,
Oh, well, let's take a look. Yeah.
forcing the Relic here either gets him a card off the probe, which he's not going to have access to next turn because the Relic's just going to eat it, or it forces the Relic to break, which is good for him long term. So I don't think his Snapcaster is actually getting better over time. It's just getting worse. So I like running it out there. There's not a whole lot he has to worry about McLaren playing on turn 3. I don't think McLaren
Right.
even can play anything. He does have to worry about Electrolyze. He knows that's in McLaren's hand, but I don't think you're getting away from your Snapcaster getting Electrolyzed eventually regardless. It depends on how much he prioritizes the Relic. If he doesn't think the Relic's a big deal, then waiting seems reasonable, but if Relic is something you're afraid of going long, which I think it kind of is, then just running out the Snapcaster does help against that.
In case you're wondering, the winner here will face Jacob Wilson from Team Face to Face Games, Gold Level Pro, just 18, his first Pro Tour top 8, a winner of a modern GP in 2012, and it is Malira Pod that is awaiting in the final for one of these two. But which one?
Now it looks like Shaun McLaren has stopped drawing lands.
As has Dickmann, they both just passed on their last turn, taking no actions on their turn. Dickmann really doesn't want to play Snapcaster with Electrolyze there.
Go.
And McLaren doesn't want to burn Electrolyze because he wants to be able to kill Snapcaster with it. So they're both kind of just standing pat here. But looks like McLaren's going to break serve first. Drawing the land when both players have missed land drops is so huge.
There you get a look at the Relic of Progenitus, the only non-land permanent in play.
Now Dickmann's faced with either discarding or just playing something for marginal value. So he's not in wonderful shape here.
Realistically, how much time does he have to see land number 3? Are we down to one draw step?
So it's weird because McLaren is playing a control deck that kills glacially slowly. So it's not like Dickmann's dying in the next 1, 2, or even 4 turns.
Quite.
But I think his win percentage, his chances of winning this game are now way less than 50 already, and drop kind of dramatically every turn that passes without a land.
All right, here we go. We get an Electrolyze.
17.
So
Electrolyze into land.
Got you.
I'd say that if Dickmann doesn't draw land this next turn, then he's got a really, really tough fight. Like we're talking about, less than 15% to win the game, or less than 10% even.
Wow.
Maybe that's close. The Dismember actually is relevant here since it kills Colonnade, which is one of McLaren's ways to quickly, close out the game. But if Dickmann's next turn is like play a Snapcaster for nothing or Lightning Bolt you for nothing, then that's putting him in a pretty difficult position. It's especially rough because none of his lands are green. He's got double Scavenging Ooze in hand, which
we can take a look at what's
which at this point are kind of functionally Grizzly Bears, but casting Grizzly Bears is better than discarding.
Hey, he'd love to have a Grizzly Bear in play at this point.
Yeah. Whoa, it looks like a McLaren board in timely reinforcements.
Yeah.
That's actually kind of nice if he's getting pressured and randomly bolted. It also trades for Snapcaster plus extra value, so of course it's not exactly what you want at this point.
Not exactly pressurizing.
Turn Steam Vents.
Oh boy.
Oh, boom.
Interesting. McLaren's just basically using Cryptic to force Dickmann to
hoodwink
discard,
him.
hopefully. But Dickmann drew the Hinterland Harbor, which is what he wanted to draw. Since now instead of discarding, he gets to play a Scavenging Ooze potentially.
Go.
And that's exactly what's going to happen.
It's kind of funny that Ooze isn't a huge threat, and it actually gives McLaren an opportunity to resolve timely. Then he can kill the Ooze and start attacking with 3/1/1 tokens. The 3 tokens are really hard for Dickmann to deal with.
Yeah.
It's actually a great sideboard card. Especially since Dickmann only on 2 lands. He's playing a land next turn, but even on 3 lands, you can't resolve anything that threatening. You definitely want to just play a timely reinforcements here to get guys on the board. And then back it up with all your counterspells.
And because he started on 5 cards, every card he's drawing that is a land that gets him back into the game, he's not drawing a spell to do something useful. McLaren, meanwhile, already has 5 land in play and a full grip of 7 cards. They're very good.
Yeah, he's also tempted by, looks like playing Snapcaster and Electrolyzing the Scavenging Ooze, which is a pretty good bit of value. I mean, I'm not going to deny that. It does put a clock on the board, but I like the clock of of timely reinforcements even better. The biggest advantage to this play is what just happened, which is that McLaren does get to draw a land.
Right. He gets to draw land. He also gets to remove some card types from the graveyard for future Tarmogoyfs, too.
If Dickmann didn't have to play an untapped Steam Vents this turn, McLaren would actually get to gain 6 off the timely reinforcements, too, because he can fetch for an untapped duel and not use it. But I think that Dickmann might be tempted to play Steam Vents untapped in order to cast Lightning Bolt.
18. 14.
Yep.
You see he's already down to 14.
So yeah, we're going to start by bolting Snapcaster and follow it up with a Scavenging Ooze, I would imagine.
Lightning Bolt Snapcaster Mage.
Give me a look at timely reinforcements.
This is an awesome card. I played this card a lot when it was in Standard.
And go.
Yeah.
This is one of those cards that existed only in core set.
Right.
I'm not sure I would describe Shaun McLaren as a plucky underdog, though. I would think of him more as a 3-color ruthless killer.
The flavor text is relevant for this Pro Tour, though.
That's true.
It does mention the gods. So Dickmann didn't play the Scavenging Ooze, which does kind of strand timely reinforcements, but McLaren's in pretty good shape here. Dickmann has drawn the land, though, so I think that we've got ourselves a game, even though McLaren does have an edge.
Right.
But luckily for Dickmann and the viewers, the third land was, if not timely, at least present.
Yeah. Are we going into Colonnade beatdown mode?
We are.
Before your attack.
Before attacks.
Remember, Celestial Colonnade.
This way, even though McLaren is going to potentially counter this, and I think likely will, he doesn't actually get to attack with the Colonnade, so Dickmann did sequence that correctly. I'd have a hard time not trading a Mana Leak for a tapped Celestial Colonnade. It seems like a pretty good deal. But Dickmann's...
And 4 life.
Well, you're getting
Well,
that
you
no
get
matter
the 4
what.
life no matter what,
Yeah.
for sure.
But I do think that Dickmann being only on 3 land does give you a little bit of an incentive to keep Mana Lake. The fact that you can't cast it this turn because you're losing an untapped land does, I think, tip the scales in favor of actually just casting the Mana Lake. Dickmann down to 10 life. Colonnade is such a threat with Dickmann at 10 here.
Yeah, and I think that's the decision
Yeah.
that Shaun ran through in his head.
I feel like he was going to let it resolve so he could keep Mana Lake up, but then realized Mana Lake wouldn't be up because the land would be gone.
Yeah.
And I think that was the tiebreaker.
yeah.
He was probably on the fence, and then was like, actually, yeah, this just has to happen.
Right.
15? Yep. Okay.
Or maybe he's just fetching untapped lands so they can make timely reinforcements, closer to active.
There we go. There's your Mana Leak. I would like to keep my foily Celestial Colonnade.
And McLaren never saw the Combust get cast last game, so he
Right.
might not really be thinking about it. Not that Dickmann has it, but that is one of Dickmann's better draws here, because that Colonnade, represents lethal in 2 hits if you combine it with Lightning Helix.
Sword of Feast and Famine.
Apt.
In this game, mostly famine.
Yeah.
There have been, there has been more famine than feasting here. That Relic of Progenitus, it's doing its job. I mean, for costing 1 mana, it's had a dramatic effect on this matchup.
You think this game looks very different without it?
Yeah, without it, the Snapcaster Mage would have been cast on turn 2, getting Dickmann as land drop a full turn earlier because it would have flashed back Ataxian Probe.
Right.
It also would make Dismember a potential flashback. The paying 4 more life is kind of rough. It also makes even just Scavenging is more of a threat because it would have been able to eat, one of the previously killed Snapcaster Mages.
Wear and Tear has appeared in Shaun McLaren's hand. Once upon a time, i.e. games 1 and 2, that would have been a Johnny Vengeant.
I bet McLaren would trade that for a Johnny
Yeah,
Vengeance, right?
I'm sure he just thought about it. He's like, oh,
Yeah.
so stupid.
So
Shouldn't have listened to Luis.
McLaren is choosing not to fight over a Colonnade attack this turn, going back to draw going, which is okay, but Dickmann could just draw 2 or 3 land in a row. Then you're back to an actual game. He's not pressuring Dickmann at all.
But the more lands he has, doesn't the Colonnade attack become a little more scary?
Yeah, I think that now we're seeing the impact of, again, McLaren being wary of just losing a game he thinks he's winning, which, correctly, because he is ahead here, to, a Splinter Twin combo. Like, here's where if Dickmann was just playing a blue-red tempo deck without Splinter Twins, McLaren would certainly just be attacking. But because Dickmann could potentially go end of turn, Deceiver, untap Splinter Twin, he's got to respect that.
McLaren may be not too far away from taking down a Grand Prix champion. Another one awaits in the final in the form of Jacob Wilson.
Yeah, and I think that, if, again, drawing lands is actually pretty good for both players right now. Dickmann needs it more, but McLaren will take lands. His hand is also pretty expensive.
Right.
Colonnade is also, pretty good flood protection, which is certainly something needed around here.
Yeah. Too soon.
This was 6, 7 years ago. All right.
Go.
All right, now we've gotten to the draw go portion of the game.
Dickmann has to be really close to wanting to just cast cryptic commands and deceivers here, since otherwise he's going to have to discard every turn he doesn't draw a land from here on out, which is a tough spot to be in.
Good.
McLaren's content just to sit there. Dickmann is too.
He's going to just burn him, hope to draw maybe a couple snapcasters.
Go.
Well, things are looking better for Dickmann now. I mean, he's still behind just because of he's behind
Sure.
now 2 lands and a decent amount of life, but he actually has enough lands that he can actually play the game now, as opposed to before where he was kind of bottlenecked on playing 1 to 2 spells a turn. Now he actually gets to cast things.
And as you can see, full 7 cards in hand, of course. Similar on the other side of the table for McLaren. Hope you all bought plenty of popcorn at home, boys and girls. Had a bit of a day.
Yeah, I think that because of Relica Progenitus, I mean, I've said it many times, but because of Relica Progenitus, even though both players have a bunch of spells, look at the cards in Dickmann's hand that don't really do that much. Like Scavenging Ooze, Snapcaster Mage are both much weaker. And going long, Dickmann has a lot more of these cards in his deck.
Snapcaster Mage.
Here comes just a Snapcaster Mage.
Ambush
hoping to
Viper strikes again.
Yeah. Hoping to see if it'll hold a sword.
Yeah, I mean, Dickmann's pretty far away from being able to just cast sword and swing for the fences, but it is the hope eventually that there will be feasting.
Draw. Clear checks.
Claire attacks, says Dickmann.
Attack.
In we go.
McLaren could just run it. He could just activate Colonnade and try and block. The funny thing is that would actually work here, but it's pretty gutsy to do that.
Yeah.
16.
I think McLaren has to consider cracking Relic here. It turns off his
7 for you?
Snapcasters, but he still has a Helix in hand for a future Snapcaster.
Oh, just cycle it for a card.
Yeah, because he really wants to draw a land, because he wants to move in on timely reinforcements this turn. Because putting 3 1/1s into play will end the game really quickly.
Of course.
He drew a Snapcaster off the Relic draw, which is kind of funny sequence of events.
But he does have a Lightning Helix in hand.
Yeah, so he might actually just go Helix you, see what happens. Snapcaster, Helix you, get it remanded, and then untap and play timely reinforcements.
Helix you.
I like leading with the Helix. I mean that's the only spell he can really lead with here. Just casting a random cryptic doesn't make sense. So, but leading with Helix with Dickmann at 7 life is a pretty strong opener.
I do hope they remembered to keep exactly 7 cards in hand at the end of turn, because both of them are doing an awful lot of drawing, then doing nothing, and not having the land to play that they want.
Believe me, both of these players are keenly aware of how many cards.
Yeah,
are in each of the players' hands.
the discard step is a real thing in the control mirror.
That's right, yeah.
You know, you're thinking about how you can strand an extra card in your opponent's hand at this point.
I mean, we saw McLaren cast a cryptic on like turn 5 or 6 just to bounce a land.
Yep. 4.
Wow.
I will
goes out
go to 4. Yeah.
This Scalding Tarn's looking a little suspicious too. it drops Dickmann down into single bolt range, which she can't be happy about.
Now, we do know that McLaren boarded out all his lightning bolts after game 1.
I don't think that they informed Dickmann of that, though.
No, I would hope not. I would hope not, Luis.
I suspect that was not the
Well,
case.
yeah, he also knows that, you know, that Lightning Helix can jump out of the graveyard.
Yeah. So it looks like McLaren's setting up a big Helix fight, potentially. He's not going
Good
for
text.
the timely reinforcements.
Attack.
Right, he can also attempt a Colonnade here.
17.
What I think he's going to want to do here, which is pretty good, is fight over a Helix and then maybe try to tap Dickmann out and then Colonnade. Because Snapcaster plus Helix is lethal. You know, it's 5 damage total. So if he can do that, he forces some kind of reaction. He knows Dickmann has to do something, and then a Colonnade hit is also lethal, and he's got Counterflux, which is great in kind of a big counter war.
Finish turn.
So it's going to be tough for Dickmann to get out of this. I mean, McLaren has Cryptic plus... Well, I guess he can't cast Cryptic and Counterflux, but he can cast Helix plus Cryptic here.
So you got to look at the increasingly seen counterflux.
I've never really seen it get overloaded for value, but it is definitely something that the card does. So this is almost assuredly going to draw a remand.
Remand.
There it is, yep. Not just instant in the sense of the remand, but instantly coming out of Patrick Dickmann's hand.
Yeah, and if I'm McLaren, I think I like just fighting over this. And then the lower Dickmann taps, the more likely you are to win on your turn with Colonnade. Dickmann's going to have to have a lot of answers.
So we're going to see Cryptic Command.
Cards in hand.
Still got 5 after the Cryptic. Dickmann has 6.
Dickmann basically can't counter the Helix without basically dying. Yeah, the problem is if he doesn't counter Helix, Snapcaster is still lethal, so he has to. If he does remand the Helix again, and then tries to play Deceiver Exarch, McLaren gets to activate Colonnade attack and cast Counterflux on it. So unless something very strange happens, I think McLaren actually makes it through the finals here.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's really starting to look that way.
you're seeing the impact of missing land drops, 11 turns later.
So it was 5 cards, right?
So it looks like actually Dickmann does have an out here. He can Cryptic the Cryptic, bounce the Colonnade, and get attacked down to 2 by the Snapcaster. So that's the only way he actually survived this turn.
Celestial Colonnade.
That sounds like that's the conclusion he came to as well.
Doesn't put him in a good spot. I mean, he's going to basically fight this whole fight next turn, except at 2 less life because of Snapcaster Mage. But it does keep him alive, and that's all you can ask for.
Well, I mean, he also does have a potential, way to win too, where he can maybe, he goes to 2 here.
Sure.
But he does have a Deceiver Exarch in hand.
Yeah,
And he has 1 draw step to maybe 2 draw steps, really.
Yeah, he's got a couple draw steps to draw Splinter Twin here, and that's going to be his best path to victory since he's far enough behind that it's going to be really tough to win to just be a normal damage. And McLaren's at 17.
So here we are, Shaun McLaren, 17-4 ahead. Both players still with plenty.
Look what's going to strike again.
Oh, lucky threads of disloyalty. I put on my good suit today.
Shaun McLaren is really threading the needle here. He's going to be able to take Snapcaster, hit Dickmann down to 2, and then just have 2 lethal Snapcasters plus a Colonnade in play with counter backup.
Oh,
I've never seen threads be this good in the blue control mirror.
Or just, you could have just stopped at, I've never seen threads of disloyalty be this good. If you'd like to look ahead to what he's going to steal in the final, that would be great.
He's going to somehow steal a Malira and go off.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is pretty huge because now instead of McLaren having his Snapcaster trading for Dickmann's, now he's got 2 that Dickmann has to deal with, and he's got the Colonnade still, and he's got counter spells in hand.
Oh boy. I'd like to threads your Snapcaster Mage, please.
So does Dickmann need to go down to 1 here? Does he need to just sacrifice that land?
Yeah, I mean, it's not really different than keeping it in play. The difference between 1 and 0 is negligible. He does blank the fetch land in hand, but that's just going to be true no matter what.
Cards in hand, 5.
I don't really know how Dickmann gets out of this. I mean, he's got to play multiple cards here and not die to Cryptic plus Counterflux.
Right. And there's also a path in hand here.
Yeah, the path's also relevant. I mean, the Colonnade's still sitting there lurking. Like, McLaren is actually presenting a ton of different threats here.
Dickmann goes to 1. He's had an amazing run.
And he does sacrifice it. Go get a land. I mean, he basically needs to draw Twin and 4. No, that doesn't even work because of the Colonnade.
He needs McLaren to, like, skip his turn in some fashion.
Yeah.
Which is going to be, I'd say, unlikely. And McLaren even has, like, Wear Tear and Path in case of a Miracle Twin
it's
win.
It's just disgusting.
I mean, sometimes you have it all. In this case, McLaren did.
The maple leaf is prominent today.
Yeah, I guess you know, if McLaren wins this, then we're guaranteed a Canadian taking home the victory.
We are indeed.
Second Pestermite or Exarch.
It's a Dispel, which would have been awesome maybe a few turns ago, but at this point it's not really the fated retribution that that Dickmann really would need here.
I can imagine Dickmann just extending the hand and not forcing McLaren to simply actually do the winning.
I can imagine that, but my guess is that
You think he'll play?
after watching these matches, yeah, I think he's going to play this last turn out,
Yeah.
which is not only reasonable, it's his right.
Yeah.
I mean, Dickmann gets to cast Deceiver, try to tap a Snapcaster Mage, then Colonnade gets activated, then... Oh yeah, Deceiver also has... Yeah, the fact that McLaren also has Path, since McLaren can fight over the Deceiver or he can fight over the Cryptic Command, but he also has Path for Deceiver, so I think what McLaren's going to want to do is let Deceiver resolve. It taps a Snapcaster Mage. I guess you not even necessarily activate Colonnade, just attack with Snapcaster and then have Path up.
So McLaren draws Porphyry Nodes.
I don't think that one's going to get cast this game.
No. And the reinforcements, they were not needed by the looks of things.
It seemed timely when he drew them, but unfortunately, he didn't go for it on turn 3, turn 3 or 4, whenever the Scavenging Ooze got cast.
They were like when we're doing a deck tech at the end of the day. They arrived right on time, but then they're just standing in the doorway waiting around to do something.
Yeah.
They were here on time.
Here's Deceiver Exarch. And Luis has mapped out for us.
McLaren has a bunch of different routes to victory. One is countering the Exarch and then countering the Cryptic. The other is letting Exarch resolve and then pathing the Exarch and attacking with Snapcaster and countering the Cryptic. Another is letting Exarch resolve, animating the Colonnade, and countering the Cryptic.
You're saying countering the Cryptic quite a lot.
Well,
Is
it's
that
hard to
pretty
kill someone
important?
through a Cryptic, so that one probably has to get countered.
Okay.
McLaren basically has his option on whether he wants to counter this or a later spell.
Looks like he's choosing this. Counterflux.
Can't even dispel that, and then can't dispel or remand or anything that. Actually, at this point, Dickmann's actually even out of Cryptics, so it's going to be tough. I was even trying to think of what Dickmann could possibly have to survive, but considering his Cryptic is in the graveyard unreachable because of Relic and because of F6.
There's the hand.
There you have it. And Shaun McLaren is into the final of Pro Tour Born of the Gods. A huge match there. 3 phenomenal games of Magic with great cards, 2 great players, tremendous effort. And Shaun looking very much like he did when he got into the top 8 yesterday, BDM, like he kind of can't believe that he's here.
He's had a couple of ridiculous games.
I mean, blue-red-white control lends itself to that.
That is why you play the deck, right? Because
of course.
It's just, these ridiculously complicated decision trees and, but, lots of tools and ways to puzzle out of almost any situation.
Yeah, I mean, the cards Cryptic Command and Snapcaster Mage do a whole lot of work.
All right. We have 1 match to come, but we think Shaun McLaren deserves a teeny tiny break.
Just Shaun McLaren?
Get out. Well, they can't see we're here. Right, so we'll see you in a bit. We'll see you in about 5-10 minutes for the final. Back to the news desk.
Hey guys, welcome back to the News Desk. Marshall Sutcliffe here with Randy Buehler over on the far end and Zach Hill here. Randy, talk us through a little bit of that last semifinal match. A lot of things to take in.
I really enjoyed that match. I thought all 3 games were sort of independently had really interesting things going on. If you think back to game 1, Dickmann had this awesome late game plan, right? I mean, he's playing Tarmogoyfs, he's playing a combo deck against control. You'd think he needs to come out with the flurry of stuff and try to win before his opponent can take control. And that's just not what happened.
Right.
He was baiting permission with Snapcasters and whatnot, and then when the permission would come out, he was remanding his own spells for card advantage. He just had this sort of awesome late game plan. I mean, it was close. He kind of almost ran out of life. Like somehow the control player was the aggressor. He was attacking with Colonnades, but I mean, Dickmann had the long-term plan. And I mean, you were talking about it too. You and I were just sitting here marveling at this sort of awesome card advantage strategy that somehow Dickmann stitched together out of a deck that didn't seem designed to do that.
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at the deck list, it seems like it's this combo deck with some threats. It can play early aggressor. It's got a really, deck can kill on the 4th turn of the game. But I mean, we were watching the match. It seemed like everybody had like 7 cards in hand the entire time.
Well, but the thing that was awesome to me was they both had 7 cards, and then Dickmann still had 7, but McLaren was down to 6, and then he was down to 4, and then there was like 2 cards, and somehow Dickmann still had 7. That was just like you could just watch McLaren's hand shrinking, and then Dickmann finally won the game. It was just
unreal.
That was a cool game. It was a very cool game. And then game 2, that threads of disloyalty.
What is going on with threads of disloyalty this week? And I didn't think it was going to be a major player, and it seems to be.
But Shaun McLaren should take that single copy of threads of disloyalty and put it in the sideboard of every deck he ever plays. It has some magical ability to only come up to the top of his deck exactly when it's needed, and just do ridiculous things.
Yeah.
It's the same threads that in the previous round, in the quarters, he stole a Wall of Omens that had been enchanted with Splinter Twins.
That's right.
So he's just, instead of his opponent being able to draw an extra card every turn, he gets to.
And he did. He drew 4 or 5 cards over the next 4 or 5 turns, and it basically took over.
In the quarterfinal.
Yeah.
And then in this match, obviously, he got it with Sword of Feast and Famine attached to the creature.
Your opponent's equipment, and you steal, somehow he stole his opponent's equipment too.
That's right.
That doesn't happen.
That's not what Threads is supposed to do, but there it is.
Yeah, it even won in the last game. I mean, it wasn't as crucial, but it was actually sort of the killing blow to steal that Snapcaster Mage. So.
Yeah.
Best threads ever.
I'm thinking maybe instead of putting it in his sideboard, he should just frame it.
Maybe, but then he doesn't get to use it.
He doesn't get to play it.
Anymore.
I mean, you can take it out of the frame when needed.
Okay.
Just for Pro Tours. Yeah, just for Pro Tours. That's his Pro Tour threads. Yeah, fantastic stuff down there in the feature match, Aaron. We're looking forward to even more.
Yeah,
we now have our finalists.
Was pretty cool too. Game 3, obviously, Dickmann winds up keeping a 0-land hand on the draw. Almost gets away with it, right? I mean, he keeps 0-land Gitaxian Probe. Draws a land. Probes into a land. I gotta say though, one of the things, I think Dickmann got a little punished there for the fact that, you know how many lands are in his list?
I don't actually know how many lands.
There's only 21.
Really?
Yeah. He's actually been really tight, and part of it is he's got a bunch of cantrips, he's got probes, and he's got Serum Visions. Part of it also, I think, is he's kind of expecting his creatures to get Path of Exiled. He's like, my last 2 lands are coming from your Path of Exiles. I mean, if you look at the twin list that Patrick was playing previously, he cut a couple of lands for this tournament because he's got his land, he's got like Tarmogoyf and he's got Scavenging Ooze, and somehow they always seem to turn into lands.
And the best answer to the Deceiver Exarch combo is, again, Path to Exile.
Right.
And as we were talking about, you don't always want to wait for Splinter Twin to happen because, they aren't just going to 2-for-1 themselves.
Yeah, I mean, we've been singing the praises of that deck list all weekend, and I still do think it was kind of an awesome strategy, but I think he got a little punished for the 21 land strategy in that last game.
Now, do you think that if somebody were to build this deck themselves, I mean, we saw him do some pretty advanced stuff with the deck. That wasn't what we would normally expect to see.
Right.
Can somebody else just pick up this deck and play it like that?
I mean, you need some practice. I mean, you could tell Patrick Dickmann is a man who played a lot of Magic with that deck and understand all those interactions. I mean, figuring out exactly when to remand your own spells is always, I mean, it's fun. We were talking about that way back in the day. You were talking about this, right?
Oh, yeah. The remand, I mean, one of the things you can do, remanding your own spells to gain card advantage, sort of like Arcane Denial way back in the day.
Oh, I remember that. Absolutely. Yeah, I had a buddy, Andrew Cuneo, would build these decks with like baubles, 0-mana artifacts that he would play just so that he could Arcane Denial his own spells. That would let you draw, multiple cards. It was, it's a niche strategy, but sometimes it comes up. It can be pretty powerful.
That's right.
I mean, we've been, to be fair, we've been singing Patrick Dickmann's praises. I think we should give a shout out to Shaun McLaren.
Oh, absolutely.
And we're going to be giving Shaun McLaren a lot of love as we come forward here.
He did, in fact, advance to the finals.
He did indeed. Why don't we take a look at our finalists?
Yeah, let's do it.
If we're ready to go. So let's take a look at Jacob Wilson. He's the first one in now. The first thing I want to note here, there is definitely one thing in common with both players. They're both from Canada. We will have a Canadian champion from this Pro Tour here. So
Alexander Hayne will have company in the recent past.
Yeah, that's right. So Jacob Wilson, 18 years old, team face-to-face games. He's a gold pro. He has a Grand Prix victory under his belt, first at Grand Prix Chicago in 2012. This is his 5th or 6th Pro Tour. He's played 5 before this. And here he is in the finals. Randy, 18 years old. A lot of potential with this kid.
Oh yeah, he's the real deal. I mean, you could see that he's surrounded himself with good teammates. You know, that team face-to-face games, thinks he is one of their best players. I mean, they think they've got Alexander Hayne, and they think Jacob may be better. I've heard him called Hayne 2.0.
Oh, is that right?
Absolutely. And it was funny too. I was listening to Jacob Wilson. He was hanging out with Alexander Hayne, Sam Pardee, Josh McLean, Dave Shields. They were sort of waiting for this final match to come together, and they were rooting for Shaun McLaren. They were rooting for Shaun McLaren because Patrick Dickmann, if you go back and look at the Swiss, in round 15, he knocked Josh McLean out of top 8 contention. And in round 16, he knocked Sam Pardee out of top 8.
Wow, 2 teammates.
Yeah, 2 teammates playing exactly the same 75 as Jacob Wilson.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, Dickmann, same 75, Dickmann wins. They were saying now that they've seen the deck list, they were like, whoa, that's what's going on? Like, they just did not understand. I heard they were like, Dickmann was psychotic was the word that they used. He's just like, this guy has this crazy stuff going on. Seeing the deck list, they thought they had a better chance, and 3 out of 5, they thought they had a better chance, but deep down, they wanted McLaren.
That's right. Let's take a look at how Jacob made his way into the finals here. His first draft went okay. He 2-1 his first draft, lost his first match, and then was able to pick it up in the constructed rounds with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wins in a row, and finished his day with a loss.
Look at round 14.
Yeah, check that out over Shaun McLaren. So
finals preview. We didn't know it.
Yeah, and it looks like Jacob Wilson was the winner in their first meeting.
And if you remember, they were actually at the top of the Swiss too. Jacob Wilson was the first person to qualify for this top 8. With 2 rounds to go, he was put in a position where he could double draw in after beating McLaren on table 1.
Okay. So let's take a look at our other competitor here, Shaun McLaren, also of Canada, 25 years old, 6 Pro Tours under his belt. He was a competitor in the Magic Online Championship Series in 2012, and this is his first Pro Tour top 8. Again, 2 Canadians in the finals.
Yeah, although not on the same team.
Right.
Interestingly.
McLaren, more of a lone wolf.
Yeah, BDM was calling him the Canadian Wilds. Which
I bet like BDM was calling him that.
Well, I mean, I guess there's a few stragglers that aren't on a specific team, but Shaun McLaren, he's found his way with this red, white, blue deck, and it doesn't seem like he needed a team.
Yeah, and it may not look like from that screen like he has a lot of Pro Tour experience, but you go back one Pro Tour, he finished top 25 at Pro Tour Theros.
Right.
There are not very many people that have been top 25 in each of the last 2 Pro Tours.
Right.
Kai Bude pulled it off. It's pretty good company. Kai actually went, I think, 17th into 15th or so.
Yep, pretty solid.
And Matej Zadokai.
Yeah, wow. So
Big Z. Those are the only 3. That's it. That's the list of people who've been top 25 at each of the last Pro Tours. Those 2 and our finalist, Shaun McLaren.
All right, let's take a look at how he got here. He 3-0'd his first draft pod and then ran off 3 wins in a row. So starting 6-0, that had to feel great. Start. He did pick up a loss to Michael Hetrick with Living End, but beat Matej Zadokai in the last round there for an X1 start. And then he also 3-0'd his next draft pod.
6-0 drafter.
6-0 drafter. Yeah, very impressive. Picked up a draw with that Blue Moon deck of Li Shitian, and then was able to win, lose, and then win to get in.
Yeah, he had actually clinched in round 15. The round 16 match was just for seeding. So he basically, rather than take a draw, he and Zeibold, who was also in the top 8, played basically to see who would have the higher seed, who would get to be on the play.
That's pretty substantial, given that Zeibold was playing an affinity deck, obviously one of the decks that likes to play first as much as possible. So that was actually probably a big match.
And it's funny, the one reason Jacob Wilson didn't want to see Shaun McLaren in the finals is because by winning that match, McLaren is the 1 seed, he'll be on the play in the finals.
That's right. Now let's take a look at Jacob Wilson's deck list. Randy, walk us through, if people haven't seen Birthing Pod, give us the overview here.
Yeah, this is Birthing Pod. This is Malira Pod specifically. There's some Kiki Pod, which is another variant that was running around, but Malira Pod was the more popular version of it. The key to the deck is the single card Birthing Pod. It lets you sacrifice a creature to go get another creature of 1 higher CMC, and that means you can fill your deck with mana creatures and interesting things to go get. So when you've got a pod in play, it's like your entire deck is in front of you. Yeah, there you see it. Sacrifice 1 creature to go search for another. Getting the game-winning combo is kind of the headline stealer, and this deck does have an infinite combo. Malira plus a Vizara Seer, which lets you sacrifice creatures, can go infinite with anything with Persist. But the deck's power, you don't have to combo kill, and often you don't. In particular, in the finals, I think what you'll see from Jacob Wilson is a very grindy sort of mid-range card advantage strategy. He thinks that he can sort of out-card advantage the control player by just playing all these sort of grindy 2-for-1 strategies. That's what I think you'll see him doing. And yeah, Birthing Pod, I had it at number 1 in my Modern overview coming into this. I thought it was the best deck. I think Birthing Pod itself I think it's probably the most powerful card that's legal in Modern right now. And this is the deck that you can build out of it.
All right, now, what about on the other side here, Zach? We're going to take a look at Shaun McLaren's deck list. He's playing, well, basically a pure control list.
Well, he is playing a pure control list. It's blue, white, red control. You know, you see all the usual suspects: Mana Leak, Path to Exile, Lightning Bolt, Snapcaster Mage, Cryptic Command. But a thing that you can't underestimate about this deck is the amount of burn in it. You know, normally you think control going super long, but this game really kind of like fairies can turn around in a heartbeat. You have 4 Lightning Helix, 4 Lightning Bolt, 3 Electrolyze, 2 Ajani Vengeance, and 4 Snapcaster Mage that can pile on damage very fast. That plus the Celestial Colonnade mean that, you know, you're not safe once you start getting down below, you know, 14, 15 life. So, you know, you look at a Sphinx's Revelation control deck, you kind of think of it as pretty slow and pretty ponderous. This deck can put a game away fast.
Yeah, it's interesting. I heard somebody call this a glorified burn deck, and I hadn't thought of it, but, you know, it does actually, it can take either role, right? It can point those burn spells at creatures too. You know, if you're playing against Zoo, it's like, well, I'm not going to go to the face. I can just kill everything that you put out and then clean up the game, well, with Colonnade. But there's another card here, Sphinx's Revelation, one that is, you know, kind of the terror of Standard, but it doesn't see a lot of play in Modern.
Yeah, it doesn't see a lot of play in Modern because a combination just the increased speed of the format and cards like Tectonic Edge, plus the existence of Colonnade giving you something to do with your mana anyway, mean that you don't need a late game clincher. That said, Sphinx's Revelation in McLaren's deck goes over the top over almost everything. And no matter how much disruption goes on, no matter how many thought seizes that are able to be cast after sideboarding, Sphinx's Revelation plus mana and an untap phase mean the game is going to end in short order. You know, it's not as though he's drawing a bunch of Azorius Charms and an Aetherling and a bunch of extra lands off these Sphinx's Revelations. He's drawing Burn Smells and Snapcaster Mages and Cryptic Commands. So, you know, a Sphinx's Revelation for 3 or 4 is just backbreaking in a format as powerful as the Modern format.
Yeah, and that's something that that does give that, you know, calling it a glorified burn deck, they don't get access to cards like this, right? I mean, this is one that will kind of set it apart. So this is going to be an interesting matchup. What do you guys make of it?
It's a hard thing to say. I mean, I've been advocating for McLaren this entire time, so I guess I'm going to go ahead and give him a holler. But I will go for McLaren. I think he's got a lot of removal for the Birthing Pod deck's combo pieces. I think he has a more powerful late game, and I think that while the Birthing Pod deck, Wilson's deck, better after sideboarding, I think cards like Sin Collector are not as devastating as they were against the Storm player.
Randy, you agree with Zach?
Well, in McLaren, no, but in McLaren's
You're allowed to
McLaren's
disagree.
Side, no, I will disagree. But I do want to give McLaren props for being a tight player as well. I mean, in addition to talking about his deck, I think that in particular, if you look at that semifinal we just watched, I was super impressed by the crucial turn in game 2 where he has the Threads of Disloyalty, his opponent has a creature, so great, he's going to get to steal the first creature. And there was that equipment sitting on the table. And so what McLaren wants is, his dream is to steal the Scavenging Ooze while it's wearing the Sword of Feast or Famine, right?
Yes.
But they've both got all this untapped mana. And so McLaren summons a Snapcaster Mage to give his Lightning Helix flashback, right? And then says, okay, your turn, what do you want to do? And he's basically baiting Patrick Dickmann into equipping and then fighting over the Lightning Helix. And the thing is, McLaren wanted to lose that fight. He wanted to make sure the fight happened, and he wanted to make sure his mana was set up such that he could go all in on the fight and lose, and Dickmann would be completely tapped out, burn through all his counter magic, then he untaps and threads it. It was just this... It was awesome.
It was beautiful.
It was
to watch.
absolutely beautiful. And McLaren, I think, set the whole thing up. It was all set up. He picked a fight he intended to lose. And, you know, at any point, if Dickmann backs off, McLaren's Threads isn't going to be as good. It was just beautiful. I was really impressed by McLaren.
Yeah, the key of making sure that there's no other creature left to re-equip to is just genius. Yeah, it's fantastic
mana
stuff.
to fight over the thread. It was just beautiful. That said, Jacob Wilson is also a great player. I mean, I don't think either player is significantly better than the other guy here. I mean, Jacob maybe has a little more experience, but I mean, McLaren does have top 25 at the last Pro Tour. I mean, I think these are both rising stars in Magic. I like Wilson's deck, though. I mean, I think this birthing pod deck is just incredibly powerful. It doesn't matter who you're playing against. You know, there are lines, if you know this deck well enough, and Jacob Wilson does, to beat just about anything and deal with just about anything. Seeing his opponent's deck list is an advantage. And you know what else is an advantage? I think best 3 out of 5 really helps Wilson.
Yeah.
You know, Wilson survived the scary rounds where he only got best 2 out of 3s, but birthing pod is a deck that gets to access its sideboard cards more often than the opponent. So I like Wilson's chances.
All right, well, you know what? We're ready to go down there.
Awesome.
It is time for the finals here from Pro Tour Born of the Gods. Let's send it down to the booth. LSV, BDM, and our own Rich Hagan.
Thanks very much, Marshall. Thanks very much to Zach, and of course to Hall of Famer Randy Buehler. Gentlemen, here we go. The gloves are off. 2 out of 3s are done. Now it's the straight shootout. 3 out of 5. Luis, who wins?
I'm going to go with Jacob Wilson here.
I've got to follow the same thread I've been following throughout and go with Shaun McLaren.
Okay, I'll go with the tiebreak. I think it's going to be Canada. Let's watch the final.